2021. Tonight's meeting of the Select Board is being recorded for RCTV live on Comcast, Channel 22 or Verizon Channel 33. The videographer for tonight's meeting is Rob. Check out rctv.org for more information and for replay times. Tonight, we have just a few but very important items on our agenda. Our agenda doesn't have the usual structure. Tonight, there is no public comment, no liaison reports. The primary goal for tonight's meeting was to finish hearing from town department heads and the town manager for the proposed budgets for fiscal year 23. But at 7 o'clock, we will also vote to approve an opioid settlement participation agreement. And then at 9 o'clock, we will have an update discuss on a recent policy change we made to our communication policy and just check in with the board members and see how we think that's going. Board members Bocci and Landry will be joining us remotely, perhaps around 7:30. So we welcome them and look forward to that. So with that, Bob, I haven't seen anything in the packet on the opioid stuff. Is everybody going to join us, or will you be presenting this?
I have things I can share.
Okay, great.
You ready?
Yep.
If I might suggest, Mark, if you want to start with the motion.
Sure. Move that the board authorize the town manager to enroll the town of Reading in 2 settlements resolving all opioid litigation brought by states and local political subdivisions against McKesson, Cardinal Health, Amerisource Bergen, and Janssen Pharmaceuticals, Inc., and its parent company Johnson & Johnson, and to execute and submit the subdivision settlement participation forms by January 2nd, 2022 to the Attorney General's office.
So moved. Second.
Okay. Thank you. This is an issue that Town Council and I have been working on for several months, actually, and it's now reached sort of at the end of the first stage. There's 2 options that the board has. One is to join what is effectively a class action lawsuit throughout the country, and I'll get into the details of that shortly. Or the second choice is the town does not wish to join the class and can litigate separately. Both the Attorney General, Town Council, and certainly me all think it's far more effective to join the class action suit, but I'll show you some details here. So these are some FAQs from the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General in Massachusetts and many other municipalities is running this. Let me just run through some of the quick overviews. Is it real? Yes, it is. Has the state joined in the settlements? Yes, the AG Healy is running this, as well as many of the attorneys general across the country. If we join, will we receive direct payments? The answer is yes. Sort of light lifting on our part once it's all resolved, over a amount of time that is. How much? That's a question that nobody knows. Nationwide, there's a 15% cut for municipalities and a much higher percent for states. But in Massachusetts, that has not yet been decided. That is still being negotiated. So we, as it says here from the AG, that we expect municipalities to receive a good deal more than the 15% default. And if I start hesitating, it's because I'm also admitting people in the waiting room. And the technicalities on how to join, it's all online. I've seen the forms. I've seen the way to do it electronically. Importantly, the deadline is January 2nd. If for some reason Reading could not decide tonight and in time for January 2nd, we should contact the AG's office, who has been reaching out to those of us who have not yet joined. I did get a call this morning and just a voicemail saying, are you aware of the deadline, and so on and so forth. See if there's anything else that is really relevant. I've asked the chief today to involve the coalition in some of these details. They'll be far more well-versed in the terminology and some of the detailed work. Once we get to that, that's probably still 6 months away. So really the question is whether the board will agree to join the class and to, let me get the motion up again, to ask me to fill out the paperwork, basically. So I'm happy to answer any questions at this point.
So Bob, do we know how many municipalities in Massachusetts have already joined in?
We don't have a number, but we've heard virtually all of them. There's a couple of larger cities that believe they have unique circumstances and a better case to be made, and they are interested in using their own resources. So a couple of the larger cities have decided not to, but we have not heard yet of any sort of town or moderate-sized municipality opting out. That doesn't mean they haven't, we just haven't heard.
Chris?
That was my comment.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Okay. Bob, what does 15% of what? What does that mean? Any idea?
No, nobody knows, honestly. It's, nationwide, it's in the multiple billions. How much parcels down to Reading? Who knows? It's probably not going to be an amount that would, be earth-shaking. And, depending on exactly what happens and how it goes, it would most likely be directed at something like the coalition, some effort like the coalition that we have. Other cities and towns that don't have that may have to make other choices.
All right, that makes sense to me. Yes, Mark.
So I guess my gut would be that the Attorney General, Maura Healey, has been one of the people spearheading this and certainly has the Commonwealth in mind. And I think that for me is enough to kind of follow the lead of what's going on there. We certainly have been impacted by opioids in the community, and it's important that, given that there's going to be a settlement, we participate in that. And I think certainly the coalition is the most likely place for it to go. But it seems to me to make sense to do this and do this before January 2nd.
The other thing I should add that the AG points out sort of near the end, none of the settlement funds will go towards the state to pay the Attorney General's staff or fees. They're taking care of that separately. So the settlement is, as much as is going to either the state or the towns as is possible.
All right. Okay, any other discussion? I concur with you, Mark. Okay, I'm ready for a vote. Okay, so all in favor of the motion before us? 3-0.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, and so before we turn it over to the department heads, I neglected to mention a little bit earlier, so no public comment tonight. Certainly at any point, send us emails if you have comments. And I discussed with town manager today that we can have a public process, a public input process as early as our meeting on January 4th. So we'll definitely have future public comment and future public input on this budget. So thank you all for coming tonight. Okay, Bob.
Just for a second, does FinCom have
I see Amy is joining us, so I don't have to
Okay.
soft shoe.
Okay, yeah, does FinCom have a quorum? Do they want to convene?
Hi,
Oh, hi, Ed.
Karen. I'm actually remote. We do have a forum, so I will call FinCom to order.
Very good. I think that's it. Okay, great. Okay, whenever Amy's ready.
Amy, do you want to share the presentation or do you want me to?
Sorry, technical problems. Actually, I was going to do it, but actually at this point, it's probably better if you do it.
Okay, if you haven't noticed, we just noticed half an hour ago, there's been a Zoom update that changed everything, so.
Yeah, that's why I'm clearly changing. I'm clearly struggling today.
So can everyone see the screen that says Reading Public Library budget?
Yes.
Yes.
Terrific.
And hopefully I'll remember to see you instead of just staring at the screen when the change slides. Okay. So this is the level 1 budget, and I'm Amy Mann, and I'm the director of the library. And this budget was presented to and approved by the Board of Library Trustees at their November 9th meeting, 2021. Next slide, please. So the first level one budget, the trustees are recommending 1.998025, which is a 3.4% increase over the current fiscal year 22. Salaries, as is with most of the departments, salaries are the main driver for our budget, about 80% of what we ask for each year. I think we heard last week the town manager has set the non-union staff increase to one step of 2% plus a 1.75% COLA, which is a total of 3.75%. Sure, the number we'll hear tonight as well. All library staff positions are non-union, and even though the number is 2.75%, because of the way some departures and some new hires, and instead of having a flat 3.75% increase across the board on salaries, it comes in at about 3.5. The most significant change, which jumps right out at everybody, is to the salary for the new Director of Equity and Social Justice position. I'm going to start off by saying that that is an adjustment so that it's comparable with other positions that we're seeing now in other communities like Birch, Andover, Amherst. And just to give you a little bit of the history of this position, it was a little over a year ago when we started discussing adding this position into the budget. So it was November 2020. At that time, the position was not on the classification chart that we have, and the estimate was based on what the information we had in 2020, research that had been done earlier in 2020, and at the existing employment market. It was not a single person's decision to set that salary. It was contributors included the town manager and myself and the ad hoc committee, which some of you were on the ad hoc committee, and also the board of library trustees. So after the position was approved at town meeting, it's still not on the classification schedule. The Human Resources Director, Sean Donahue, and I went through the process of working through the classification recommendation, which came out to a grade I, which the select board then approved to put on the classification schedule. And just so you know, the for those of you who are not familiar, our staffing, non-union staffing compensation chart has 14 steps, and each of those steps are 2% apart. So in general, we look to hire within the first 1 to 3. I think, Bob, you can correct me, but I believe directors, department heads can hire steps 1 through 3. Bob does 4 through 8, and select board is anything over 9. I think that's correct. So there's a general process that we've been through. It's a very detailed process going through qualifications, things like that. So that's how we landed at grade I. The starting salary for grade I in the FY22 budget is $73,000 and change. So the 76 that we ended up putting in for FY22 is at about a step 3 level. So that's sort of assuming somebody has some little level of experience, they have met basic qualifications. And then the increase to 82,000 is a combination. If 8.4% is a little misrepresentative because what you're looking at is a 5% adjustment plus the 3.7 or 4.65% adjustment plus the 3.75 step and COLA that the person would get. So I will say that we have been through the process of hiring. We started posting in August, and we went through the process. We had some great interviews. We had some final interviews. Some of you in this meeting were on those interviews. And we had a final candidate who declined our offer. The person would have to have had relocated, but they did take a job that was over 25% more than what we were offering. And then we started looking around at other towns and municipalities. So the number of, whatever is there, 82,350 is roughly considering the steps 3, 4, or 5, and is sort of the outside cost, if you will. I have never really added that much to the classification schedule, so people with more experience with this will probably be able to speak to this, but you know, when you put money in to hire someone, you don't necessarily put the lowest possible amount. You have to put in a range for your rehire, and then hopefully you come in below that. So the 82,000, which is an 8.4%, is the 5% adjustment plus the 3.75% overall increase. And I just wanted to cover that before we moved on to it, because we have received a tremendous number of questions.
If I could just interrupt for a sec, because I can see this and no one else can, or you can. There are hands raised, so Karen, I don't know how you want to handle that. I can tell you who's got a hand raised right now, Ed Ross and Marion Downing from FinCom.
Okay, I'd be happy to take questions. Which one was first?
Oh, I don't know, they have to fight.
So questions from FinCom, you mean, right?
Yeah. Okay,
Go ahead, Marion, why don't you go? Mine was
Okay,
up to
ladies
to
first.
call us to order, so that, I took mine down.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Unsurprisingly, I'm going to have a question about the equity and social justice pay increase. One of the questions I had is based on something you just said, and I tried to write the numbers down as you spoke. You said it was something like 3.75% of this is a step increase, and 4.5%, or I don't remember.
4.65.
4.65 was performance.
Yeah.
I guess it just strikes me, you haven't hired the person yet and you're presuming a level of performance, whereas you have all of these existing staff members who've worked through the pandemic, et cetera, who aren't getting this level of raise. So how is that going over?
So I just want to clarify that the 4.65 adjustment has nothing to do with performance. It has to do with the hiring range. So let's say you're going to hire someone and you say, it's, as we do with many jobs, you need to have a bachelor's degree and you need to have 5 to 7 years experience, and your hiring range is commensurate with experience. So if you start and have 1 year of experience, you might be hired at level 1. And then if you have the 5 or 7 years of experience, you might be hired at a step 3 or step 4.
Sure.
So that's an incentive. So the range is, the top of the range is the number that you're seeing, the 4.65 adjustment is adjusting the top of the range. So rather than saying we're definitely going to be looking, and we do require, actually, we were asking for 5 to 10 years of experience. Now we're looking really more like 5 to 7 because we can't afford somebody who has 10 years of experience. So it's a little complicated with that. So the first adjustment is to say, okay, the 76 is maybe a little low. Maybe it should be closer to 78 or 79 on the outside. That's assuming we can get someone with the perfect resume, with the perfect interview. Then, it might not be that much, that's saying that's the outside number. So once you do that adjustment for the 4.65%, it's just sort of a random number, but that's the number based on how we ended up on the exact. If you go onto the town website, there's this great chart. It's the compensation chart, and you can see every single grade and every single 2% going from step 1 to step 14 for every single grade. If you're a numbers person, I think you'd appreciate it. So what happens then is, if I say I'm going to hire someone at a step 4 and it's $78,726, I'm just making that number up. That person, if they were hired today, on July 1st, every non-union employee, assuming they don't get fired, would get a step increase of 2%, and that step would also receive a 1.75% COLA. That's just a total of 3.75%. So whatever you get started with, every non-union employee on July 1st is going to get a 3.75% increase. So you kind of moved up to that a little bit, that 4.65%, assuming we hire them at the outside of the range. No guarantee that we will hire them at the outside of the range. Could hire them for lower. Then they're going to get that step in July. So does that make sense?
Yeah, that was one part of my question. I understand that better now. The other part is, I guess, how are you really determining comparable salaries? Because this is such a unique position.
It really is.
I looked up Amherst. I'm looking at their job posting right now, and it's got significantly more responsibilities. This person's reporting to the town manager. They're supervising people. They have to look at the HR department's diversity metrics, I mean, they all kind of have an overlap with the library in reaching out to the community, but just looking at Amherst and Andover really quickly. Andover's, I think, is in their school department, and Amherst, I have it on the screen. They look much more I don't want to say meaty, but a lot more responsibilities. So how do you look for a comp? Is there other kinds of directors in a library?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and we are using a lot of the language from that to craft the job. As you're pointing out, there's not a huge amount out there. In terms of training stuff, offering public programs, offering, I think, I'm not sure where the reporting structure would be. This person is going to be responsible for managing an advisory board. This person may be responsible for volunteers. This person is going to be responsible, and if not directly reporting to, have ties to the superintendent of schools, the town manager, select board, board of library trustees, the school committee. They're going to have about 50,000 major bosses. So in that term, I also think that this is classified as many. You can look at that, again, in addition to the compensation chart, which has those 2% steps. The classification chart will give you a good idea of other jobs that are in this position, that are in the grade I position. So like assistant directors are sometimes there. I think maybe like the GIS coordinator might be there. So some of it has to do with technical skills. Some of it has to do with responsibilities. Some of it has to do with very specific job needs, in terms of this is not something that you can just go and have a liberal arts degree or even an engineering degree and just come out and do. We're requiring some very specialized knowledge and training. So there are a lot of things that go into the process. Every job that comes across the desk, whether, that's new, is classified according to a process that we go through. And I know, Bob, you can talk about this, but there will be hopefully at some point a job, what do you call it, a pay and class study where people go over, an outside consultant will go over every single position in the town. Hopefully none of us will be downgraded. Hopefully it will be a combination of most people being upgraded. But a lot of that goes into determining whether someone is, and there are legal things that go into determining whether someone is exempt or whether they're hourly, how much responsibility they have. There are people who are this grade that don't supervise anyone. There are people who are this grade that supervise 20 people.
Okay,
So
and just
the last
very brief part, and I thought of this because of our new health director that's coming in. He's changing buildings, and so he mentioned he needed some administrative support. And I even see Arlington is now looking for a DEI assistant. Will this position have sufficient administrative support within the library, or are you going to be looking to? I don't see any kind of administrative support for this position in this budget.
I mean, my goal would be that we have a department assistant. So yes, I believe that person, we have plenty. I think part of the reason for putting the position in the library is that there already is a lot of support on this type of work, right? So we're not going to, I think the other thing is because it's a day situation is a little bit different because physically, if the person if the day we're staying in town hall, perhaps it would be different. I can't really speak to that, and that's a very different job and it's a very different type of department. And I do think that this is a perfectly fine place, but I think all along, part of the reason we have separated this position out into its own division is that should at any time in the future the town decide they wanted to grow an entire department, it could be something like we had a lot of people working in health, and then we reached a point where it was very important to have an actual new public health director at the department head level, and then they're going to grow that department. I don't see that happening anytime soon necessarily with this position, but I think it's structured that way in that it could grow if the town felt that there was a need. I think the idea is right now is to work on getting the person hired and starting the work, because there's never going to be a perfect time or a perfect answer. Certainly, if I'd had my druthers, trying to create and work on a new position in COVID via Zoom probably wouldn't have been my first choice, but we'll work through it.
That's all from me. Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
Karen, if I might, Ann has just joined the meeting from the board.
Okay.
And I believe Jean Borowski has her hand raised.
Okay. Welcome, Ann. Okay, so Ed didn't have a question at this time?
No.
Okay, so let's recognize Jean then.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to echo what Marianne suggested. If this is salary is being increased largely due to comparable salaries in similar positions in other communities, this is sort of a request for when the budget comes before FinCom in the future. I think seeing some of those would be really helpful. So I just would like to make that request. So I was thinking along the same lines as Marianne on that one.
Yeah, and I will know, sometimes it's difficult because sometimes people, just so you know, traditionally, Reading, when we post, we will often just post the actual hiring range, meaning if we're anticipating hiring from step 1 to step 4, or step 1 to step 3, that's what we're going to post. Other communities will put the bottom of the steps and the very top of the steps. And that's a recruiting choice. So, you know, I believe it was Andover, I get mixed up with the age. Mine was like 73 to 93. Was someone going to get hired at 93? I'm guessing not. My guess is they'd have to be there for a little while before you did that. So that's the actual full range. We generally tend to say, you know, this is the starting range, an actual real range.
Gotcha. And I just have one more follow-up question. I actually think you misspoke, or I misheard, or I misunderstand. You mentioned that this position would be managing an advisory board. And my perception was the relationship was the other way, right? An advisory board would manage this position is what I understood.
I think that would depend on how you, like, I guess, how would you describe how the board that Erica McNamara works with the coalition?
I guess that's my question to you. Is she more managed by a board, or does she more manage the board? That is my question. I perhaps misunderstood it. Entirely possible.
Yeah, so Erica is responsible for getting people on the board, running the meetings, making sure that the community, she's listening to the community. It is a board that assists her in many ways. So that is the board. I guess if we wanted to get into true power dynamic discussion, which could go on for hours, I'm not sure who's managing who there. I think it's completely a board that is representative of people in the community that have a very, very passionate interest in working with preventing substance abuse and supporting those who are dealing with the illness of addiction. So that's super important. She can't do it alone. It's a community effort, and I think that's the same thing here. So it's a supportive board for the entire division, not necessarily to dictate whether Erica's doing, a job. I believe that her reviews go through the chief. That's her boss.
Okay. That's very helpful. So the management piece falls to staff, which would be
correct.
You. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Chris.
Thanks, Erin. Hi, Amy. So you had mentioned
Chris.
Oh, pretty good. So you had mentioned that the person who you offered the position to ended up turning it down, and they got it somewhere else for 25% higher than.
Yeah, but yeah, you have to take that into consideration. It would have been a relocation from New York, and I think we can assume that New York's a little bit higher.
Yes, I think we all can.
Yeah.
So I'm just, I guess, from my own knowledge, why would somebody apply to a position that's advertised for $76,000 or whatever, ask for $100,000 essentially?
This person came through a personal recommendation, and they had been recommended by a friend. They happen to have family in the area, and the person had been told that this was a really, really good fit and something that would be an opportunity for this person. So, this is a personnel issue, so I'm not really comfortable talking about a lot of it. And, first of all, this person has their own choices, so I can't really speak to their choice. But I think, my best guess on this personnel issue would be that it was a tough choice. My sense was from the person is that the feedback we got on the process was that the person was extremely impressed and felt thought the process was excellent, and was extremely pleased that to see a Reading like community, community like Reading, going forward with this, and actually even took the job position and reposted it to their network, because the network's, listservs with DEI listservs. and, may have even sent some. We actually have about 12 applications now that we're screening. So we're excited to see that many coming in. But it is definitely a competitive market.
Yeah, I
Does that answer your question, Chris?
Yeah, I was only mainly asking because if they were really looking for that higher figure, then your 8.4% would be massively off this time around as well.
Sure. Yeah. No, I don't think we're massively off for this area, and I think for this region, I'm sorry. I also think that this is also one of these positions where people don't go into this type of work for the salary. I would argue people don't necessarily go into librarianship for the salary. So requiring a master's degree. So I think this is one of these positions. A lot of people here work for nonprofits. Some of them come from a faith background, and they're not getting paid a lot to start with. They do this because there's a passion in what they do. It's a passion piece of what they want to do, and that's really important. And I will say that every single person that we interviewed was very. I think money and being able to pay for your rent obviously is, and cost of living is important, but a lot more of what we heard was why people wanted to do this work.
And was it originally?
I could just also add a broader perspective. What Amy's going through is not unusual right now in the organization. Her need is very specific, so it is different. Again, I'm not part of the hiring group, but Amy's kept me in the loop, and it did sound very collaborative and collegial. We have gone through interview processes where the ranges are very clearly advertised, and people at the end say, okay, if you really want me, it's going to cost X more. And X used to be $5,000, now it's $25,000. And, my answer pretty much right away is that you're not the kind of person I want. But Amy did not run into that kind of adversarial, if you will, relationship. It was very cooperative, and correct me, Amy, but the person may well have accepted a job for a lot more, but never really asked you for that.
No, they did not ask us for a lot more. They did ask about what the top hiring range were, and they considered it, and they actually took 4 days to think about it. I mean, they took a weekend, and then, we had to kind of nudge the person. So, and I had it's not about this person. This is not about this person, but let me just say, I feel extremely confident in the salary as it's laid out. I feel very confident in the process. I feel confident that Reading is ready to support a program like this. A position like this. And, I think that, I think the trustees agree with me, and that this is the best way to go forward.
And, sorry, was it originally advertised for 70,000 this year, and now we're at?
No, the hiring range was 73 to 76. Okay. So 76 is the outside number.
Yeah, I guess it's how you explained it in the beginning. The 8.4% does seem a little bit higher than it should be, because even I don't even give myself that increase every single year. No one will. So. Yes, the person will not get an 8.4% increase. They're just going to start a little ahead of where we started, or they could start, in theory, a little ahead of what we were expecting. That's all. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, no more questions here.
I don't see any hands.
Okay.
Go ahead, Amy.
All right. Now that we've come across that. Next slide, please. Yeah, okay, experiences. Yeah, so if you got 8.4% with Sarah, here's 10.4%. But it's a much smaller number. As we know, when you're dealing with numbers, there's percentages, and then there's the actual dollar values behind them. So, but one thing I just wanted to say is I am asking for, the library is asking for an increase, a larger jump on the operational expenses. Our expenses, for our purposes, we divide up to operational expenses and materials, and I just want to talk about the operational expenses. Just for the last 3 years, those operational expenses, which include professional development, licensing, equipment, has been level funded or reduced. The number you see here is actually still 1.8% less than the operations money that we requested in fiscal year 19. So that jump of 10.4%, which is just everything except for the library materials that you see on the screen, it just reflects some catch-up costs on existing services. catch-up cost for the programming budget, which is $2,500. If we had been adding to that, we might have increased it, by $250 or $500 each year over the last 3 years. But instead, we're just sort of asking for it all at once. Professional development, sort of the same thing. The other thing is that the software licensing technology and equipment and the contract for maintenance, we are anticipating adding some costs, and I can talk a little bit about that later on, probably closer to slide 8, when talking about some of the bigger projects that we're doing that don't have any sort of, that the startup costs are being paid from elsewhere, but we're going to have continued costs to maintain them. Technology often requires, as many of you know, you have to pay for a update license or something like that, content or maintenance on the actual equipment that you buy. And then with regard to that, because that is such an increase, I think it's about $13,000 total for the operational expenses, that the state only requires that the town provide 13% of materials of the overall library, 13% of the overall library budget for materials. That's sort of a number that you keep to stay certified. The trustees, we're really looking, recommend to about 13.5% to 14%, in which case it'd be about 13.5% would be an additional, that 0.5% would be additional $10,000. So one of the projects that I was tasked with this year during FY22 is to work with the Board of Library Trustees and the Town Treasurer, Endry, to go over gifts and donations, to go over grants, and to go over state aid and trusts, and to find out where we could supplement that. So I think we can easily supplement our materials that last 5% through trusts that we have, again, grants and state aid. So we're going to reduce that amount, hopefully to kind of mitigate, instead of increasing our materials budget, which would normally increase with the budget increase, we're going to kind of bring it down a little, supplement that with additional outside the municipal budget, and that's the plan for expenses. Any questions about expenses?
None here.
No, they're not here. Okay, they're really thrilling. So, okay. So, what is all of this in aid of? All the last however many minutes I've been talking. This is just a department overview to give you some context. As mentioned, salaries are always the main driver for our budget. Other than holidays and inclement weather closing, the library is open 7 days a week or 64 hours a week for 8 months out of the year, from October to May. And the remaining 4 months, they're open 6 days a week or 60 hours a week. So in addition to those weekend hours that I mentioned on Sundays, I didn't mention them, but we have on Sundays, we're also open for evenings. This is a way to make sure that we're meeting the really broad array of work-life schedules that we have in our community. There's always different formulas, different libraries do different things. We are looking at that, and we do take requests to change those. We talk about them, but we certainly don't want to cut any more hours. The requirement is 59 hours a week for our certification. With 8 months out of the year, with all of our Sundays, those 8 months with Sundays, we have 24 FTEs, and that includes 29 regular employees, plus 1 vacancy. We have 4 pages, which are the usually high school students that put our books away, and we also have 8 substitute and Sunday staff, so that makes it for staff. This complement to staffing, this 24.7 FTEs, provides in-person, walk-up, texting, chat, email services at 4 desks across 3 floors of a 38,000 square foot building. And these research and reference services for all ages were ongoing during COVID. Whether the building was open or closed, there were options to contact us for in-person or on-person, online, on text services at various times. I also wanted to point out that during COVID, the library staff ran over 500 programs, virtual programs. So some of these were synchronous and live, some of them were recorded. A few of them towards the end were in person outside, but there were quite a bit of programs, and there were a lot of programs, and they were attended by all ages, and I'm very proud of the staff. There were virtual school visits They were doing take-home packets that kids could come pick up at the library and do STEAM projects or art projects. There were concerts outside. I don't know if any of you were able to attend that, but and we also had our community conversations, which were really, really well attended. So that's an average of 1.5 programs per day for the year. So we're really proud of that. Next slide, please. So the staff also provide support and basic instruction for both on-site and virtual library services and collections. I think it's really important to note that our physical collection and circulation was really strong during COVID. Our FY21 circulation rates were about 65% of our normal usage of our 2019 usage, which was really high for our network. But it's also really high when you think that 65% of that circulation was that curbside service, which involved someone placing the request, the patron, having the staff go get the materials, check materials out, put the material in the bag, schedule the appointment pick out, make sure the bag gets down there, and then do something with it if someone didn't come up with the material. It's an extremely, extremely labor-intensive process, but it went exceedingly well, and we're now looking at one of the exterior pickup lockers so that people can continue to pick up things after hours. In addition to that, I can't say enough about staff. I think we can say about all the town staff. Library staff also did a fantastic job. We worked with the Department of Health. We worked with all the other town departments to keep expanding our services as we could by appointment. We had a lot of safety things put in place. We were in constant contact and a very supportive board of library trustees. So for about 8 months of FY21, we were able to offer modified services by appointment. And pretty much the only thing we couldn't offer during COVID were those meeting rooms, which we were excited to get back into. And we have restarted indoor programming. I'm not sure, we may be cutting back a little bit on indoor programming in the next couple of months, but we have started doing indoor programming as well. And they started slowly, but we're getting there. Beyond the physical collections and on-site services, we continue to provide a wide array of online resources for all individuals, all ages, interests, and we have services for reading, watching, and listening content for downloading and streaming. We have virtual services that include free online tutoring and test prep. I always like to highlight one of our online virtual services each year, and looking at, we have in addition to Brain Fuse Help Now tutoring, we do have Learning Express Test Prep, which is a pretty incredible, pretty wonderful database. And I think you're going to find things there you typically find, especially when you think about schools in Reading. You're going to see the ACT prep, SAT prep, AP exam preparatory work. But there's also, Learning Express also has learning and preparatory resources for graduate work, the GRE, LSAT, MCAT, and career development and resources for occupational certification programs like EMS or nursing and civil service. And finally, I always like to point out, everybody loves consumer reports, especially this time of year. We start getting a lot of hits. People are looking to buy presents for people. But it remains very, very popular. It's free and easy to use with your library card. So get a library card if you don't have one. And the other thing we added this year was Value Line, and that was in a direct response to patron requests. Particularly during COVID, we added that, and we seem to be having good success with it. Next slide, please. Since FY18, the library budget has accounted for 1.5% of the total municipal budget. And it remains a very strong and important town investment. It really is an investment in town. So in FY21, a year that was really, really impacted by the pandemic, residents saved $3.25 million by just borrowing books instead of purchasing them. So if you look at that chart on the right, adult books, young adult books, children's books, if you just add up all of that, it's quite a bit of money. And that's just by borrowing books instead of purchasing that. And then you add to that audiobooks, ebooks, movies, library loans, programs, database searches, museum passes, all of that, you're getting basically a 3-to-1, you're getting 3 times your investment for every dollar invested in the library. Our community is actually receiving a benefit. So I think it's really important to see that. Next slide, please. And it's also important to note that data and those statistics are only really one aspect of how we do business in the library. We're guided by our strategy and mission, and we go through this planning, implementation, and assessment of library services continually. Right now, we're in the second of a 5-year strategic plan, and certain elements are very much can be measured by those data and statistics I just mentioned. But more and more, we're realizing a lot of other non-service organizations, both nonprofit and for-profit, that we have to really start looking at other ways to measure our success, and really trying to find ways to assess the outcomes, not just the outputs. I encourage you to look at the library strategic plan. It's available on our website, readingpl.org. And I think if you read the strategic plan and you look at our mission and you look at our core values, one of the themes, and I hope this comes through, I think this comes through with some of the work that we're doing with DEI. Part of the work that we're trying to do is to, in essence, sort of decenter the library as the gatekeeper or a silo of knowledge. Libraries is the big institution where you would come and it could be intimidating to someone, the place of knowledge and understanding. And I think it's really talking about a shift that we're seeing almost community-wide, a shift in culture, where the library is not necessarily the provider of informative learning, but it's a place or a platform where you can come and engage in sort of transformative learning, and the library is really facilitating that rather than directing that. So it's a change, and that's one of those things that guide us. Next slide, please. In addition to those daily ongoing operations, we are working on a number of projects that were listed in our strategic plan. The first 3 are currently underway. I mentioned one of them, the secure after hours pickup lockers. We're working on that. The first 3 are well underway, and the last 3 are still sort of in concept and planning stages. We were excited this year to start working with RMLD. In October, the Board of Library Trustees approved the installation and licensing for an EV charging station that RMLD will take care of. And thank you, Bob, and Town Council. And I think Town Engineering is going to be working on that with RMLD. We're very excited to do that and to be working with RMLD, other town departments, the Climate Advisory Committee, and finding ways that the library can help support environmental sustainability in the community. Is there any questions about projects or things that the library is working on? I would just like to note that some of those projects, like the microphone digitization, the after hours pickup, and even the library app development, are funded from grants and state aid and our Reading Library Foundation. So a lot of these projects get started. It helps us avoid asking for capital improvements or anything like that. So you're probably looking at about $40,000 to $60,000 worth of investment and work that is being funded through outside resources. So I just want to note that we go after grants, and we do get state aid, and we do get donations. So we appreciate that. So those are the questions. I guess the big takeaways are getting a really nice increase for non-union staff, 13% materials budget. We're a great investment for you. We're very focused on community, and visit our readingpl.org if you have any questions.
Great. Board members? Chris?
Thanks, Karen. So Amy, on slide 6, so that's 3 back, Bob.
Yep.
So the database search is 1.6 million. What is an example of that? Because that seems like a lot of money that people saved or spent or whatever.
Yeah, I think those numbers, I think these numbers are a little vague. Like, I think they say 1995. So if you were to go on and Google, let's say you were doing a research project, you were going to go onto Google and it would say like, oh, here's the perfect article to support your paper. And by the way, you need to sign up for, the common one at a college level would be like JSTOR, which is I can't remember what that stands for, but it's like, I I had to look at it all the time. So normally a college or university would have access to that, but let's say I don't, I'm just doing a paper by myself and I want this article from the Journal of whatever medicine, I have to pay anywhere from 20 to 40 bucks to get that article.
And that's free at
And
the
it's the same thing with
library?
New York Times. Like, I mean, I think if you don't belong to the New York Times, you have to pay what, like a couple bucks, $5 an article or something like that. So that's
Yep.
part of, that's how that's figured out.
And that's free, is what you're saying for us?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think the qualification there is that our databases are not, I mean, the databases we have are more consumer-y kind of things. So we do have access through InfoTrack and through EBSCO, master file. We have access to a fair number of journals, like private journals and everything. We also have access to, People Magazine and Good Housekeeping. But I think, so I would say that, it's possible that 1995 for articles is a little high. But yeah, the average, I mean, I've done research where I've had to get, they're like, they want $50 for this international article. And it's good because I'm supporting copyright and providing, giving money back to the authors. I think it's important to do that, or the publishers. But yeah, we provide these databases that give you access to information.
And the only other question on this is the interlibrary loan request. What is an example of that?
That's when we get books from other libraries. So in the state of Massachusetts, we get for free to borrow library books from pretty much anywhere in the Commonwealth. Sometimes when we go outside of state or whatever, there actually can be costs associated to it. I mean, it's not only shipping costs, but sometimes some colleges or universities, I mean, we do get things from all over the world, but 99% of our interlibrary loans from other libraries come from within the state. Massachusetts has a wonderful state program. If you have a library card, a valid public library card anywhere from the Commonwealth, you can use it in any public library in the Commonwealth. So we are able to get books from all over Massachusetts for people. We pay a very minimal cost for, I think it's like $1,000 for transportation. We get daily deliveries, Monday through Friday. We get deliveries of books from all over, not only our own network, which is Noble, but also Minuteman, Clams, the Boston Public Library itself, CW Mars, Sales. I can't remember how many consortia there are, but there's a very complex system, and they all go to this big magic warehouse where they get zoomed in and they get put in bins and they get redistributed to other libraries throughout the country. And we send out a tremendous amount. I'd say, 40,000 interlibrary loans. So that's a decent number of interlibrary loan requests.
Okie dokie,
Does
thank
that
you.
answer your question?
Yes.
Mark?
Thanks, Karen. Amy, I kind of just want to say thanks for all the hard work that the library put in. You guys were very important and are a very important institution in the town in kind of taking care of people when it was harder necessarily to get inside. A lot of the different programs that are available, the ebooks, the other activities, being able to access all these things. I was looking at the number of things I can check off that I participate in. And one of the best ones is museum passes. And the ability to go to a variety of different museums in the state. You can reserve them. They're getting to be electronic at last, which is really nice. And it's just a bonus. I just kind of, thanks to everybody for being so important to the town and hanging in there through COVID. So just a thanks.
Yeah. And I thank you for that, Mark, and I'm very sorry that I went on for about an hour, so I apologize. Mine was supposed to be like 1.5% of the budget, sometimes 15 minutes, but sorry.
Okay. No, I concur. I appreciate a reminder of everything you offer. I don't visit as often anymore because so much is online, but I just got myself set up for the Washington Post, and I can tell you the Wall Street Journal is like $600 a year. So this is awesome. I love saving money and I love the library. And thank you also for putting in a format that shows value delivered. That's super helpful, and it's a good way to think about things. And you know, I had the opportunity to participate in community conversations for sure during COVID, and that was great. Also, I noticed your hours have changed.
Probably haven't, maybe I had a typo.
Okay, so it used to be like, I thought I had to get there by like 5 o'clock on Mondays, but I could be out of date because I do a lot of online
yeah,
stuff
you're out
now,
of date.
so, yeah. And then some days,
Yeah,
like, I'd
it's
always.
9 to 9, 9 to 9, 9 to 9, 1 to 9, 9.
So, we see you.
Presentation off with the Elder Human Services staff that is shown here in this photo. They are the frontline workers in public services, and they are the ones that touched so many people in the vulnerable population, and did so greatly and so amazingly for 21 months and going, and kept us safe and continue to offer programs. So thank you to that team. And I don't know if everyone knows who I am, but I'm Jean Delios. I'm the Assistant Town Manager, and I'm the Department Head for Public Services. And this is my Level 1 FY23 budget. Thank you. So this slide really points to the boards, committees, and commissions. And just as an overview for public services, the budget that I'm presenting tonight exceeds the guidance. It is asking for more support. It's asking for more salary money and for more outsourced professional services. And we'll get to that at the end after we tell the story of why we need that. But this budget is also designed to improve workflow so that we can add resources and keep up with ongoing demands. And this slide in particular drives the point of how heavily we are connected to our boards, committees, and commissions. Public services clearly has the most, and we embrace that. But we really want to think about how do we balance all of this with the existing capacity. There are over a dozen boards, committees, and commissions, and other kinds of groups, ad hoc groups. We've added a few. Park is the ad hoc committee that's working on downtown parking. And Recalc, we had our first meeting last night, is the ad hoc committee that's working on the next iteration of the Pleasant Street Center. Is it a senior center? Is it a community center? Those are the questions we're asking. So I want to especially emphasize that there's a strong collaboration among the staff and the volunteers, and that is critical to our work. I also wanted to mention our community partners. We have a tremendous resource in community partners, and that is how we leverage our ability to do more and provide more services. For example, we recently were able to bring in some partners related to 625 Main Street. That's the building downtown that lost the power and displaced, I think it was 39 apartments. So we were able to bring in Metro Boston Housing and the Salvation Army to join us in creating a task force to assist the displaced residents of 625 Main Street. The town also worked with Reading Cooperative Bank and deferred to them in taking the lead in doing fundraising. The town can't do fundraising, so it was great that we could pass the torch to Reading Cooperative Bank. And the residents really rallied and contributed to that effort. And so through this collaboration, we were able to help these residents that were displaced with housing through Metro Boston Housing and through actual financial assistance from the Salvation Army with temporary housing and with financial assistance through the donations, which we were not a part of, but we just queued up. So it's that kind of thing that I'm most proud of, when we can be creative and pull resources together through community partners. So moving on to the next slide, I wanted to highlight our org chart just to give folks an idea of what we look like. There we go. So this is public services, myself as the department head, and then 2 assistant department heads. And my role here is to provide leadership and to provide staff with the tools that they need to do the job, as well as to plan for future needs that we're faced with as we deal with new challenges and new demands. And so the two assistant department heads, the community development director and the community services director, along with our permits coordinator and our economic development director, form the leadership team. From there, we all work together to support each other and to deliver excellent customer service, ranging from planning, affordable housing, permitting, and social elder services, veteran services, recreational programs, and the like. Lots of work with our boards, committees, and commissions, and we're very grateful to be able to collaborate with them. The notable changes that are not on this org chart is we have a new health director, and a day started about a month ago. We're lucky to have him on board, and that is now a separate health department. The other thing that I wanted to highlight was the fact that we've hired a building commissioner and an elder human services administrator. Those were two positions that were really hard to fill. We got two great people, and they were filled in the past 6 months or so. We also promoted a staff person from Elder Human Services to the Senior Center Coordinator. And so now we're hoping that we can fill her position, which is the clerk position at the Pleasant Street Center. But you can see here that as you go down into the various divisions from conservation, planning, historical, building, and then over to economic development with our district management working group, and then Elder Human Services, Recreation, and Veterans. And I just want to point out that veterans, we get a lot of support on veterans, and that 75% of what we provide in veterans is reimbursement from the state. Next slide, please.
Jean, this is Karen. Can I ask you a question before we leave?
Sure.
Just to try to put names with blocks. The permits coordinator, is that Kim?
Yes.
Okay, and has anyone ever asked for the permits on their home? This woman gets them to you in 5 minutes and they're electronic. It is phenomenal, and I haven't seen another town doing that, so yay, I love it. So I was just wondering.
We're very lucky to have that.
Yep, she's awesome. Okay, thank you. And then I was just wondering, who are the assistant department heads for community development director and services director?
So that's Julie Mercier is the Community Development Director
Okay.
and the Assistant Department Head, and Kevin Bo-Miller is the Community Services Director and the Assistant Department Head.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I also want to point out that the technology, and big thanks to the IT folks, getting the newer technology that I think I might have mentioned last year, we went live right in the middle of the pandemic with a whole new software program. We didn't plan it that way, but that's how it ended up. But it's been a lifesaver. This new system is working out great. And that's really, again, having the tools to do the job makes it that much more efficient. So thanks to IT for helping us out with that.
One more question, sorry. It could maybe go later. Where is the GIS administrator in this organization? Is that you?
Yeah, the GIS administrator isn't in my department. That's in IT.
Very good. Thank you.
But we work very closely.
Okay.
Okay, so now moving on to the FTEs. This slide shows you we have 21 FTEs, and that's for FY22. Basically, I lump myself in with the admins as the department heads, and then we have the 4 people in building, planning and economic development, noting that that's where the community development director, Julie, sits there. So if you took her out of it, it would only be 2 people. The Metro North Regional Housing Services Office, we created this regional office that focuses on affordable housing, and we house it and we staff it. And we're in it with 5 communities currently and possibly a 6th. Conservation is 1 staff person. Veterans is 1.5. That's Kevin Bo-Miller, again, the Community Services Director. And the half-time veterans position is vacant, but we are hoping to fill that. Elder Human Services has 5 FTEs, and Recreation has 1.5. Next slide, please. So going right into economic development, and hopefully a lot of people are aware of all of the work that we've done in this area. It's a big area for us. Certainly with COVID, we had to pivot and work with our partners. And securing grant funds was a big thing that we spent time on and we're continuing to do in all aspects of the department. But one program that I really like because it's simple is the Bistro Table program. Those are the blue tables and chairs that you see around. And that is a program that is very inexpensive, and we provide to the businesses and its town outdoor furnishing, for lack of a better term. They pull it in at the end of the day, and it's really an easy, no-fuss program to add life to the downtown areas and support local businesses. We secured a grant for the recovery effort, and that has been some great opportunities for some of the things here for the rapid recovery plan. And hopefully some of you have seen the presentations, but lots of ideas for how we can assist with businesses rebounding after the pandemic. We hosted a lot of virtual forums during the pandemic. We've done a lot of outreach, a lot of community engagement, and a lot of public forums. And one of them was the Economic Development Summit that we had a few months ago, and that highlighted plans for the next phase of the downtown infrastructure improvements and also the Rapid Recovery Plan. We've also been working for the past few years, again through grant funds, on a recovery strategy, but that includes creating a district management entity. That is a downtown organization. And so the brochure on the far right with the maroon heading talks about a business improvement district. With the consultant funded through the grant, we've continued our work in this area, and we now have a business improvement district steering committee comprised of private citizens and business owners who are executing a signature campaign to establish a bid. We are really on the sidelines there, and these private people who are serving on the committee are taking the lead. Next slide, please. So this slide really gets into what we've been able to offer to businesses. This is a slide that summarizes federal programs. I won't go into all the nuts and bolts of it, but you can see that it's been millions of dollars that has gone to businesses to support them during a horrifically difficult time. And then if you could go to the next slide.
Jean, quick question. So if we go to the links, I haven't had time to go to these links yet. So that number, for example, the PPP loans, Reading businesses received between $32 and $46 million, and that link will take us and show us?
That link will show you what the program's about. I don't know that you're going to get all the detail on who was benefited, who was the beneficiary.
So did the federal government just send town hall a report that that's what people received in the community?
Right. We never got the actual dollars. We were the conduit to point these programs to the businesses, and then the funds went directly to the businesses. So I'm not really sure how much data you're going to get from these links.
No, these numbers are impressive. So I was just wondering, thank you for.
We can get that. If these links don't provide that data, we can definitely pull that off if that's of interest.
Okay, I don't know if it is. These are impressive numbers. Thank you for sharing them. Okay.
Yeah, we're really glad that we could support, because, as you know, a lot of businesses didn't make it, and the ones that did, I think, were able to limp along with whatever support they could get. Okay, moving on to regional and state programs. The micro enterprise program, that was a grant program that we were lucky enough to get in on with the MAPC and their MAGIC consortium. The town of Ashland took the lead, and this was a regional consortium for low and moderate income business owners. And surprisingly, there's a fair number of them out there, and they combined, and these are the smallest businesses you can think of, for $260,000 in grant funds. That was a big win for those small businesses. And likewise, the $1.98 million for sector-specific small business grants, that was for brick and mortar businesses, veteran, women, minority, and such. So that was another big win to the business community. I'll just go through these quickly. This gives you a picture of how many permits we've issued, what the fees have been, and how many inspections we've completed in the past calendar year. And you can see that everything is trending fairly high. The building permits, this data only goes through November 30th, and December has been a crazy busy month. My office is about 10 feet from the counter where people come in, although most people are doing it online now, but the hustle and bustle of building is right out my door. So I'm very engaged in this, and I'm very excited that we are turning around these permits and we are not slowing down the process, but still doing the work to make sure that projects are properly permitted. And the fees, you can see they're right in line with where they have been in the past few years, and the inspections are keeping up. So that's the workload and the product that we are very proud of in building. Moving on to conservation.
Mark's got a quick comment.
question. When was the last time we did a review on permit fees? Was that a couple of years ago?
It was, yeah, it was. We've talked about them. We've presented different ideas. The fees are something we could talk about, but because we base the fees on the value of the construction, the building permit cost,
Goes up.
in my opinion, is high. I mean, everything is high. And I think it's probably a bigger conversation to think about what that means for the community. But it's definitely something that I'd be interested in talking about.
Yeah, I think it's a worthwhile thing to put on an agenda at some point, just to think about it compared to other communities. And it certainly is not slowing down the number of permits. That doesn't seem to be the issue. So we had to just take a look at how those are set up at some point. So,
Yep, that'd be great.
thanks, all set.
Okay. So conservation, again, is another busy place. And you can see that in 2021, the minor projects, which is the MPs, were a little bit lower than in other years. But certainly the RDAs, the requests for determinations of applicability, those were very high. So it sort of cancels each other out and shows you that this is a busy board, a busy division. And again, we're very proud of the work that they do, and glad that we can all be supporting this effort.
Can you, Jean, I got lost in all those acronyms. Can you just quickly go through the last three?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The blue are the minor projects.
Yep.
The, I guess red is the request for determination of applicability.
Mm-hmm.
That's to say, do I have to go through your process?
Mm-hmm.
The OOCs are the order of conditions.
Okay.
That's final decision. And ORADs and EXTs are, I'm not going to know what those are. Sorry. But I can get that to you.
Okay, well, we have conservation members in the room. Anybody want to shout out?
Oh, I think extensions. I think that was extensions of time.
extensions.
And ORAD, it just slips my mind. I can't think of what that
Okay.
stands for.
All right, thank you. That was helpful.
Maybe in the chat, if Anika, if you can put it in the chat, that'd be great. There we go. Order of resource area delineation.
That's
Thank
right.
you, Anika.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, moving on to planning. We have so many exciting initiatives in the works. We're really I think a crossroads of where we're at. The managed growth that we've been working off of is really getting back to the key elements of what makes up planning, which is keeping downtown vital, preserving what's important, and being queued up for opportunities. So keeping downtown vital, all the work that we've been doing to attract investment and look at the future planning for infrastructure improvements, and preserving what's important, our historical and cultural resources, our housing diversity, and being queued up for opportunities with our state initiatives, going after grants, and having a solid vision for the future. And when we think ahead on these things, We really are looking at changes to zoning, looking at parking management, spent a lot of time on that, bike infrastructure, what's going on with the MBTA, the streetscape, the EV charging stations, the business improvement district, and then when we look at preserving what's important, we have the open space and recreation plan update that we've been working on and nearly complete, and the housing production plan update that we'll be getting into next year, and that is one of the key things we're looking for funding for. Unlocking grants, there's a lot of them there, and if anybody wants me to talk about the MVP or the green communities, MassWorks, the Mass District Improvement, that's an economic development grant, the DLTA, and sorry about all these acronyms, the District Local Technical Assistance grants. So those are sort of the things that we're pointed towards. Bob, if you could move on.
That's a great slide. Thank you.
Thanks. And so this slide really focuses on how the volunteer-led initiatives work. And so, again, we're one big team trying to get it done. So amending the 40R, that's the Downtown Smart Growth Bylaw. We've been working since August with the MAPC, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, on a project called Your Downtown. And we've had some great meetings and forums, and we've gotten a lot of great feedback. We did a survey and got over 1,000 results. But that is really driven by the community and driven by the volunteers. And CPDC, the Planning Commission, is a big part of helping us get to the next step on this. So that's one example of volunteer-led initiatives. Modifying downtown parking for the really great work that the Parking Advisory and Recommendations Committee is doing, PARC. That's been planning, DPW, engineering, and then we've had some previous work by one of our consultants, Nelson Nygaard. The Green Communities designation, working with the Climate Action Advisory Committee, it's involved planning, facilities, DPW, RMLD, and again, with the help of MAPC and the Department of Energy Resources and our consultant, Noresco, we've been able to pull these really important pieces together and do a lot of work. And the bid, which I'm referring to a couple of times, that's a business improvement district, and again, grant funded. So hopefully the private folks that are on that committee will lead that forward. Moving on. Just again to highlight historic preservation and how important that is. It's so exciting that we got to have our historic post office preserved and then part of a new redevelopment. That doesn't happen very often. There's not a lot of examples of that. And we all work together to figure out how best to do it. And I'm very proud of that work. So historic is a key element of what we do. Next is recreation. And these are all the things that our awesome rec folks do and getting the youth in the community as well as people of all ages to be active and enjoy recreation. It's just so important and just a key to who we are. And then moving on to the next slide. Most of you hopefully are familiar with this. This is the Birch Meadow Master Plan next steps, and we're very excited that we're moving forward with some consulting work on this to begin the design of the Imagination Station parking and wetland restoration, the Central Spine Walkway and Restroom Pavilion, and the lacrosse wall.
That's a great slide. It's another one of my favorites. Thank you.
Great project moving forward. We're excited. And moving on to Elder Human Services, we decided that we would try something new, and we put up a tent to get folks to continue to come and feel safe. And the tent was really well received. It was up for several months. We're going to do it again next year. Again, just trying new things to keep everybody engaged. Lots of fun activities for our seniors who really appreciate having that resource and being creative. Kudos to the staff. We did things like had a Chromebook loaner program and tried to get folks engaged that way. We're really working hard to battle the social isolation among seniors, especially during COVID. It's been horrific. Transportation is still a big need. We have a new transportation provider for medical rides, ATS, and that's a service that's funded by the Reading Response Program and now features wheelchair rides, something that the previous vendor did not provide. The center reopened in June of 2021, and there was a barrage of attendance. We are just thrilled that people are excited to be back, and we're really grateful that we can do it in a safe way. We've worked hand in hand with health and are mindful that we want to go slow with how much activity we have down there. Some of the drive-by events like Harrow's Chicken Pot Pie distribution a few months ago, people loved that, and they look forward to seeing everybody again, being outdoors and being safe. The popular tax preparation program, that went off great last year with little to no contact. People dropped the materials off from their cars and got their returns done right away. So that's another program that was a home run. And so moving on, the veteran services, for anyone who's gone to any of the services on the Common that we've had, Memorial Day, Veterans Day. I enlisted my mother to help on Veterans Day, and she and I had a great time doing the refreshments. It was really just such a special day on both Memorial Day and Veterans Day, and I'm so proud of the special way that we honor our veterans, and I'm excited to keep that going. We do need more help in this area. We have a half-time position that we're going to be filling, and even though there's been in the past few years a little bit of a dip in the demand for services, there have been some more recent claims, so we think that's going to trend upward a little bit now, and so we're very mindful of keeping that going. And so the last slide is really the grand finale here. This is the recap of the 5 asks for additional funds. So the first one is we are asking for a part-time zoning board of appeals clerk. And the reason we are asking for that, and I think many of you know, professional staff, myself included, we often go to the meetings and take minutes. And so the zoning board has been handled by someone in the professional side of the planning staff. We'd love to have that shift over to an admin person. It's a 19-hour-a-week position. And so by having that shift over to admin, we can now take the resources of that planning staff and use it for other things that we're desperately needing to shift to. Outsourced professional services, that's really to supplement the existing staffing. And so we need, we're asking for $125,000, which is a big ask. That's a combination of funds needed for housing production plan, which is number 3, and for added resources, mostly related to projects and programs that are expanding, in particular the Metro North Regional Housing Services Office, which is looking at adding another community. Number 4 is additional hours for Elder Human Services staff. And the rationale there is that there's been more demands for services, especially social services. So it's a few hours that add up in total to $11,800. The Elder Human Services Administrator had always been a 35-hour-a-week job when the previous administrator was there. The position was vacant for a long time, and then when we filled it, we realized we really needed 37.5 hours. And same with the Senior Center Coordinator, that had been at 20 hours, and during the pandemic, it crept up a little bit more, and so we finally realized we needed that to be 25 hours. So that accounts for $11,800. And then additional hours for rec staff. We have a program coordinator at 22 hours a week. We really need that to be 37.5 hours, and that's a increase of $22,800. The recreational programming is in high demand. There's a lot to it, and having that extra capacity would just be a great way for us to deliver even more in rec. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you all for your time and for your attention to public services.
Thank you. I think Mark has a question for you.
Yeah, hi Jean. So the Council on Aging meeting last night, there was a lot of discussion. I think that they and some other groups are going to be sending some letters with additional requests. So your email may be pinging soon. I know Conservation is already sending notes with specific requests. So we may want to just, you may want to take a look at those to see what those concerns are and opportunities that are there. I know that Elder and Human Services really was looking to kind of figure out what's the right way to leverage what services they can offer, and then to be able to do more outreach. And the concern that was expressed last night was we can't do more outreach because we don't have the resources to take care of them, to add the services right now. So there's a desire to do more outreach, and there's a desire to get more capability in place so that we can work with the outreach that takes place. So just that I kind of suggested that the right path would be to send you an email with some specific requests that they're hoping for. And again, I think same thing on Conservation, sharing some specific requests, hopefully also. Thanks.
Questions?
I'm good, thanks.
I'm all set. Thank you so much, Jean, and thank you to all the staff in public services for all the hard work that you've done through the pandemic.
Jean, could I ask a question on number 2, outsourced professional services? So if I heard correctly, they sound primarily housing related, and they sound like consultant type of services for specific projects and plans. Is that the correct understanding?
Yeah, I should say that the housing production plan is a linchpin in our ability to stave off 40Bs. So we've done great work, and we're over 10%. We're almost at 10.5%, which means no 40Bs can come into Reading. But the second part of that no 40Bs can come into Reading is you have to have a certified housing production plan, which we do, but that plan expires in 2023.
Okay.
So if we miss the boat and we don't have that plan updated, we're back where we started from.
Okay. And because, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, these weren't really large, and because they're housing related, I was starting to think about, maybe some of the additional funds, the ARPA funds coming from the state, and or the earmark process that the legislature goes through in early in the new year might be a place we could get some assistance. So thank you for clarifying that. Okay.
Thank you.
Just a quick follow-up on that one. Gene, with the housing plan, sorry, it was a very active Council on Aging meeting last night, also the recalc meeting. There was a discussion also of the need for senior housing and kind of looking at that as part of the mix. And I know that is, but that sounds like something that we should be thinking about also as part of that project. So
it's in the housing production plan that we have right now.
Great. Okay, then we'll renew with this activity. Super. A lot of discussion about it yesterday.
We'll just keep going with future planning for aging in place, as we talked about last night. The housing piece of that and services are really something we need to focus on.
Yep. And in addition to the aging in place, maybe specific senior housing. So designated, what our structure is for designated senior housing also. So aging in place, 100% agree. And also thinking about affordable senior housing.
Yeah, the housing production plan is where that sits. So cool. We can talk about that and bring that forward anytime.
Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, good. Thank you very much. Well, FinCom, any questions? We're good? We're good.
Jane, you're up.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jane Casella, Director of Public Works. I'd like to take a minute to introduce and thank Chris Cole, the Assistant Director, for helping compile this information. Are you going to do the slides? Or?
Yeah, let me start.
Okay.
Want to see that okay?
Yes.
Great, okay. So just to kind of make note, this past year, April 20th, 2021 was the 100th anniversary of the Board of Public Works. So we ended up having a flag raising ceremony down at the Public Works building, and several department heads attended, and others, directors from our area. Cities and towns. So it was a nice, and that's what that flag is at the bottom of the, so if you go down down to the garage, you'll see that flying. So, okay, next. This is the org chart for the Department of Public Works. There are 60 full-time employees, 5 seasonals. You probably see a lot of red asterisks there. We have a lot of openings, the most I've ever had in this department. We keep Sean on speed dial. So there's just been a trend lately this past year where municipalities are actually recruiting our employees because of either various skills they have or licenses, and so we've just had a difficult time, and basically it's on pay, because every one of them will say that they don't want to leave, but when you're a young employee and you're given, huge difference in pay, unfortunately. So I think they're just targeting certain areas, not across the board. We're really getting hurt in water and Soar, and more recently in equipment maintenance. So there are just certain divisions that they're targeting, that there seems to be money. It's probably related to, the funding that's coming in through the government. But so anyway, that's been a concern. So we have 8 divisions, and like I said, 11 openings right now. So next. One of the divisions is administration, and we have 4 clerical staff. One of them takes care of all of the cemetery administration. That is all the lot sales, the cemetery deeds, scheduling funerals, working with the funeral homes, and they oversee the water conservation program, which we'll look at after. We distribute newsletters in every water bill, responsible for the spring and fall mailer. That's a door-to-door mailer that goes to every household. They oversee the website, we do payroll, invoice processing in the department. We also work with the highway division, and normally we do 2 household hazardous days a year, one in Reading, one in Wakefield. This year I actually added one because we just had such a demand, and no sooner did we have that extra one in August that I got a call from Wakefield saying they couldn't do theirs this year. They had a conflict with the location, so we took on that too. So we actually did 3 in Reading this past year, which is unusual. We do 2 events for paper shredding, rigid plastics, metal pickup. As people know, recently we have townwide leaf pickups. We had a lot of calls on all of those type of things. We have a drop-off recycling center for styrofoam and electronics, and we still do the simple recycling. The difference with that is now it's not an automatic pickup, which it was when this program started. Now it's more, people have to call and schedule pickup, so it's a little bit of a change. This past year we partnered with Black Earth composting. It's a really good program. We currently have 381 subscribers, so it almost doubled since we got it. Slowed down quite a bit, but since the onset it's pretty much has doubled the number of subscribers. And based on our tipping fee with COVID of $92.70, roughly there's a savings about $8,000 a year for those pickups. So it's a little difficult to calculate. They base it on an 80% set out rate, and roughly 11 pounds per week, but so it's roughly about $8,000 a year. And so the current rate for those folks went from $99 for 6 months down to $69. So if we get 1,000 subscribers, that will drop a little bit more down to $59. So it's a good program. People who do use it really like it. So
Okay.
we'll encourage that.
Jane, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Just that tipping fee, how, that's contractual, how long do we have at that rate?
That changes every year, it goes up.
That
Yeah.
just says it straight up, it's going up every year, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. I didn't know if that was part of our negotiated JRM, that the tipping fee stayed the same for the period of the contract, okay?
No, so JRM has, this is Covanta. So we actually renegotiated that Covanta contract, I think it was last year, maybe 2 years ago. So it's for a 5-year, but every year it goes up roughly, I think, 3%.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
okay. And next is the engineering. So I want to say a quick thank you to Ryan Percival, and his staff, who just do an outstanding job. So they oversee an awful lot of, the building, the design, bidding, construction within the town for all of the utilities, road resurfacing. They're responsible for the EPA NIPD's permit, that's stormwater, we'll get into that in a few minutes. All the line painting, traffic signals. They work closely, as you've heard from other departments with them, both facilities and CPDC and ZBA conservation. So they sort of have their hands in an awful lot of things. So for a staff of 4 in that division, they really do an awful lot. They also oversee the Chapter 90 and the pavement management plan, which is about 3 miles of roadway, roughly, every year that 1.1 million accounts for. And they help develop the capital improvement plan for water, sewer, stormwater, and we have one surveyor on staff that works in that division. He roughly does about 200 dig saves every year, so he is a busy guy. And the completed projects, there's a few, but they were bigger projects. So the track road, if anybody's gone down there, that was really a beautiful project. It was grant funded, $500,000. They're always they just finished the Emerald Street water booster station. Some of the active projects that are currently underway is, I'll just highlight a few of them. Sturgis Park Sewer Pump Station. So that's a construction date roughly in March start. Let's see, the Auburn Street Tank, I'm sure everyone's aware of that. We have a schedule up online right now. We're a little bit behind. We're trying to get an updated schedule, but it's the fence is going up. Some trees are coming down. They're stripping material out. So that has actually been started. It was awarded to statewide Aquastore back in November of this year. And that project will be going on. And if it, they're only like a week or so behind that schedule, but roughly an end date of, somewhere in spring of 2023. Okay. And some of the planned projects. So you roughly have a little over $15 million in projects right now running. So they're just all over the place. So Gazebo Circle is another project that's coming down the pike. We're doing an awful lot of work in the downtown. So Soar, some Soar main improvements, that's doing increase the size of the Haven Street, Soar main, and doing some lining on Washington Street. We're going to be doing about $4.3 million in the downtown for water improvements. That's cleaning and lining of Main Street, anywhere from the railroad to Salem Street. And let's see, the downtown stormwater improvements, that's High Street being lined. So the size of that is staying the same, but we need to structurally make it more sound. So that's also under design. And we put in for another grant for $500,000 for the East Bridge track road. So that looks promising. So hopefully that's we'll hear in the next month or so. The highway equipment maintenance group.
Jane, can I? Chris has got a quick question for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, sorry,
Sure.
Jane. Sorry to interrupt. You have to let Carlo in, Bob, and that's all I got.
The highway equipment maintenance, we have a supervisor who is just about 1 year. Actually today it was 1 year, Jeff Cummings. So I want to do a shout out to him and his crew for all the work they do. He's responsible for all the street sweeping, catch basin cleaning, roadside cutting, sidewalk curbing, maintenance and installation, tree lawn repairs, all the signage throughout town. Potholes, you'll see that in another slide, and all the repairs for over 200 pieces of equipment for various departments. So we have 3 mechanics, and they do an awful lot of in-house repairs, so they're a really busy group. Let's see. Those are the C-Click Fix requests that we've received, to date, 645. A good chunk of them, as you can see, are potholes. They're really good at turning those around. The others are sort of just a wide variety of requests that, it's hard to put your finger on what it is. But sidewalks and potholes, that seems to be a constant theme. So our Pax Forestry Cemetery Division is run by Mike Hannaford, and him and his crews do a phenomenal job with that. So the Pax, I separated it out, and I'll tell you that this past year we reorganized. It used to always be Parks and Forestry and then a cemetery division, right? So we started looking at it and say, well, Parks and Cemetery do very similar type of work. Lawn cutting and weed whacking and picking up, trash and that type of stuff. So we merged those 2 divisions, Parks and Cemetery, and now Forestry is a separate division. It just works better because of the cross training that happens, so that we get a bigger benefit from that. So Mike Hannaford oversees, all 3 of those units. The Parks group, they're responsible for the compost center, and they also maintain those 80 acres of grassland, tennis courts, basketball courts, all the skating rinks, the ball fields, leaf pickup, trash pickup. So that's just, I think 4 or 5 employees in there that do all of that. The next slide, cemetery is has 120 interments to date. That's a 35% increase over last year. We saw last year that there were not an awful lot of burials. I think people were just, shying away from it. They might have had cremations or whatnot and held off until things were a little bit better, but we're seeing an increase. We have seen a huge increase in lot sales. That actually looks worse than what it is because the lot sales from 2019, 2 years ago, were 49 for the year. And then last year it fell down to 18 and now it's back up. So that's what that increase looks like. But they maintain all the grounds, they set markers, they do all the funeral arrangements, and they assist with Memorial Day preparations. Okay, next. Forestry Division. They take care of all the town trees, and in 2021 we planted 138 trees, which is just phenomenal. They also do all the holiday lighting between. As you know, it takes several weeks to do that. And Chris gave me a little tidbit of info. That's 3.8 miles of lights, and all of Main Street is 4.1 miles. So that kind of gives you some perspective. So the one thing that they're dealing with, the next slide, Bob, is this emerald ash borer. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because you're going to be seeing some what you think may be healthy looking trees having to get taken down throughout the town. So this is a very invasive beetle, and it's hitting a good chunk of our ash trees throughout town. You've seen it on the Parker Middle School. All of those trees along that had to get taken down. There were 9 ash trees. And so they were replaced with a variety of trees, but pretty much 348 ash trees throughout town were identified that this was at least a month ago as having this insect. And so once it gets into it, they need to be taken down. And the other reason I'm bringing it up is because it's hitting trees that are not common. Big established trees that are in the town common, unfortunately. So there are going to be a couple that have to come down there and at Memorial Park. So we'll be doing an awful lot of outreach related to that, but it's just really an unfortunate thing. So this is what you kind of, I put the middle slide in there because it looks like a healthy tree, but Mike is so good at his work. So he said, but it really was infected. So, because you can see the branches are very sparse there, right? That's even the middle. Of course, the right one, you can clearly see that it's infected. But so all that squiggly lines, and I'll show you on the next slide what some other signs of it are pretty much what you would see with this insect. Next slide. So those are all the types. So you see the squiggly line, you might see like, you know, an exit hole, you see thin or dead branches, the bark splitting. I mean, some of those signs we've seen on the town common trees, not all of them, but he knows what to look for. So he knows exactly which trees right now are infected. So yeah, it's just like I said, it's unfortunate because, and that's one of the reasons when they put in the new trees at Parker Middle, they put a variety so that if, you know, something happens, it doesn't wipe out the whole thing. But years ago, that's what they used to do, is just plant the tree and just do it over and over again up a road. Now he puts in a variety of trees when he does it. So, and that's the newer trees getting planted at Parker. So, so some of our challenges, it's honestly about staff, acquiring and retaining staff. Lately, it's about retaining them. So you probably heard that in various departments, and it's just what we're hearing across the board. I talk to other directors, and they're hitting the same problem. So some of the issues we have are related to contractors, snow and ice. You've seen that in the paper, right? So we pay pretty good rate, but you know, some cities and towns are paying 2 and 3 times. They're just throwing money at it because they don't have people, right? So I did have a conversation with the new superintendent because our focus is the roads, of course, right? So the sidewalks are great, but it's the roads. And so he understood that, you know, we will do everything we can to get sidewalks done, but that is not a priority because we're short staffed and we're short on snow and ice contractors. So I can't be focusing on sidewalks on the first day anyway. You know, maybe the second, maybe the third, but you have to also allow people to have a rest time in between depending on the length of the storm, right? So and then some of the things we're seeing, we saw it with the Auburn Street tank, supply chain issues. We've had, some issues of staffing during COVID, across the board, some garage space, both down at the DPW and at the cemetery, and then our emerald ash borer is coming. So those are some of the challenges the department faces. For the budget, there are no changes in staffing. The expenses that I'm asking for an increase are related to Trails Committee. They asked if they could have an increase for materials, tools, etc., that type of stuff. They generally have $1,500 a year in their budget, and they asked for a $1,500 increase. So, and then I did the same thing with the town forest because the bid is coming in this Thursday for the phase 2 thinning project for the red pines. If it comes in, and we have extra money, I'd like to do that forest management update plan after. Mm-hmm. If it doesn't, I'd like to be able to at least have it in for FY23. And, slight increase for outsourced repairs and line painting and gravel crushing. Gravel crushing is actually, back to an amount that we had a couple of years ago. And the other things are just, smaller increases due to expenses and supplies and stuff. So nothing really earth-shattering there. And the next slide is just sort of a summary of what that percentage increase is.
Also, Ed Ross has his hand raised.
Sure, let's recognize Ed.
Thanks, Bob, and thanks, Karen. Jane, just going back onto the snow piece, and as it relates to the conversation we had with the superintendent, and this is definitely something we can, maybe something that some of us should follow back up with the superintendent. But my question is, did you get the sense that he was going to be, a communication was going to come from either the superintendent or from the town to let families know, and whether that, we take on more responsibilities for clearing our own sidewalks and things of that nature around the schools, or paths to schools, things of that nature, to the extent that, that obviously that folks can. I'm just, kind of curious as far as if there's a communication or an action plan, given, what could potentially happen with the snow removal.
Yeah, I didn't get that, but I mean, I would love that for the town to decide that, hey, people have to stop, but I know that wouldn't go over too well to shovel, but it would help an awful lot, especially, houses close to school routes, right? But it's not that we won't do it, it just probably would not be the first day of a storm. And we've always tried to do it at the, midway through. And it benefits us in some ways to do it if we can, right? Because if you get a foot plus of snow, you're trying to now find the sidewalk, right? But we also can't take people off the trucks to do it. So we're sort of in a, catch-22. But that we did not have that conversation that he would reach out and ask, nearby house families to do that. No, I think he just was trying to figure out how he normally would communicate with us related to the status of our plowing operation and whether or not he would have school or not have school. So we sort of worked on those type of things, like generally what we do, what we cover. We sent him maps on the area around each school that we take care of so that he could have that information when people ask. And then we just kind of told them that, be patient. It might be day 2, worst scenario, day 3,
Oh, just one follow-up on that, Bob, sorry. That was the other part I was going to mention is that, if there's a determination on his end as far as how long, to suspend school, things of that nature. But having that discussion as far as what is maintained, what's not, is exactly where I was headed. Thanks, Jane. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Sorry, Ann.
No problem. A related question around the sidewalks is whether in a snow emergency, Elder and Human Services coordinates at all with DPW to the extent, there are folks who we know who don't utilize a car, but are, have mobility issues, normally walk to get what they need, or use their wheelchair to get what they need. Is there any kind of coordination to help identify where someone is in need of use of sidewalks in order to do the errands that they need to do to get the supplies that they need?
The short answer is no. We don't normally get those calls during the storm or within a day or whatever. We wouldn't necessarily be hearing from folks about that.
That's more of a question for Jean then. Is that something that the Elder and Human Services is mindful of during snow emergencies, is making sure that those folks who we've been worried about during COVID, for example, that they're getting the things that they need, that they're also getting what they need during snow emergencies?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things on that. The team down at the Pleasant Street Center is in touch with the vulnerable population, the homebound. And we have a database that we reach out to, whether it's a snow emergency or in cases of extreme heat, when it's a heat wave. So we pivot to that list when there's something going on with the weather to check in with them on a variety of things.
Okay.
And so that,
Great
if
to hear.
that's kind of what you're, kind of asking about, do we have a link to that group?
That's helpful. I think the question around like if I was wondering about that group, thinking about how certain sidewalks become inaccessible, but certainly there are other weather-related non-snow situations where I would be worried about the same population for different reasons. So, I
know that one thing that's really so inspiring in Reading is that neighbors take care of neighbors. And as someone who, not in Reading, but in another community, had aging parents in their 90s still living in their home, their neighbors, my parents' neighbors, actually shoveled them out every time it snowed. And I hear more and more stories like that in Reading, and it's so inspiring and so great that that's the kind of community we have.
Sure, I certainly, agree. I have tremendous neighbors myself, and it's been one of the wonderful things about living in this community. I just want to make sure that as a town government, we're also keeping an eye on those folks.
Yeah, we did have a shoveling program when Jane Burns was with us. I'm not sure if that's still with the pandemic. I think a lot of those things kind of went on the wayside, getting kids involved with seniors and that kind of thing. But it's definitely a program that worked well, and I think at some point bringing that back would be really great.
Yeah, I know that the high school and scouting groups were doing that, but did stop because of COVID.
Yeah.
Mark Zarrow has a question, folks.
Jane, I have probably a couple of questions, but is the FY22 on the salaries, is that your original budget numbers, or will you think your actual and?
Those are the original budget numbers on 22?
All right,
Yeah.
so with the open heads, so you're probably not gonna spend at that level, right? And do you think that'll carry over to next year?
No, there'll be some money out of salaries that are left over. Yeah, that's just the budgeted figure. We're not using that. Yeah.
Any idea the amount this year?
I'm sorry, say it again?
Any idea, I think, I can't see what the total what, about 2.8 or 2.9 million. How much do you think that'll generate free cash? So I'm just guessing, do you have any estimate of what that'll generate?
I don't, but the other thing to keep in mind is that when we did this budget back a year ago, we had not negotiated contracts at the time. So, some of those figures were not rolled into that, right? So in July, or just recently when we finished the contracts, they may have been a little bit higher than what we had budgeted, right, on some parts. So even though we're going to have some savings in the salaries, some of it is used up with the new contract figures. So off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you. Just because it's so varied, we lost somebody today, right? So if it takes me a month to pick up another person, or it could be several months. There's been some openings that have been open for several months, and not for lack of effort on Sean's part. It's just, that's just what's happening. So.
Yeah, and for Mark, the other part of that is quite a bit of the vacancies are also in water sewer, so that's not necessarily free cash, that's just a reserve fund.
Okay.
Jane, a couple questions. Just getting back to the sidewalks, because it is a big deal when we're all sticking close to home, and we'll probably get a giant winter this year, who knows? So should we be notifying the businesses, the downtown businesses as well, that the service levels aren't going to be the same? Because I'm understanding that we still do their sidewalks for them.
We do still do them, and that is the one area that we have continued to do even during the storm. But we've started talking about should we be doing this when we can't even do streets? I
think that's a
especially
good
with this many
conversation.
Openings. But yeah, it would be the first time, because we've always done the sidewalks simultaneous with the street. It's downtown sidewalks simultaneous with the streets.
Yep. So yeah, it's a good discussion and if that's the call, at least for, the immediate term, then we could just make sure we get the word out that we're all gonna have to pitch in on sidewalks this year. Mark?
Thanks. Jane, looking at some of the vacancies, the needs that you're gonna have and things, and as we're seeing the problem with retention and acquisition of new people, did you look a little bit at what you think you'll need to kind of maintain or hire in people to replace? Or is that potentially gonna be substantially higher than what's budgeted? So I wanna make sure we're not in a situation where we're kind of underpaying, and that's the reason we're not getting people to come back, and also the reason why we may be losing people. I know that you said it's specific and specific licenses and things in particular where some community rated you, which wasn't very nice.
Right. Yeah, well, we can't, we have a contract, right? So I can't just arbitrarily, although I'd like to, hire people at higher levels, right? So all of these positions are contracted, except for the administration things, engineering, all of the ones that you see here are all contract employees. So we have guidelines to what we can hire them as. So
right, but
that's all been taken into consideration with the FY23 budget.
Okay, because conceivably they could come in at a different step, right? That would be the opportunity, perhaps.
Yeah, it's rare, and believe me, we're talking about it.
Okay.
But generally speaking,
that was the real answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
One other question on the highway and stormwater salaries. That's the one item that's going up substantially. Is that more people, or is that just contractual adjustment?
No, that was a last year a very new employee, and then it got bumped up to it's not extra employees. It's just a change in the pay structure for who left and who came and took that from another division. That's all.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Jane, if I could ask a question, congratulations on that track road bridge grant. That's wonderful. And I'm excited you're able to apply for another one, and good luck. So
thank you.
We had a discussion last week about how we handle grant funds. Those are significant monies. Will those be going into revenues as Bob and ultimately affecting our free cash levels?
Well, no, because the grant is actually, we used it up completely, right, for that particular bridge replacement. So, if it comes in, it's Sharon, puts it in, but it's actually assigned to that area, so it's used up. And if we use 300,000 of it, that's what we get. We just get reimbursed, let's say, but up to 500,000, and we used the 500 last time. In fact, we used a little bit more, slightly more.
Okay, very good. And does the chamber still make a contribution to the holiday lighting?
Good question. I think they do. I think they still make. It might be like $1,000 a year or something. Yeah.
Okay,
yes,
I think it used to be more. I don't see it on their website. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And do we have any hands raised on your end, Bob?
Oh.
Okay. Any other questions?
Okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Good
Okay,
luck with the
thanks.
hiring.
There's more.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. There's more.
There's more. Keep going. Sorry.
So I'll just go over the enterprise fund. So the water and sewer divisions are led by Peter Isbell, and he's had a kind of discouraging job lately trying to retain people. So he maintains 111 miles of water mains, about 8,000 connections, two tanks, as you know, the Auburn Street and the Bear Hill, and one booster station. Last year at this time we had two, and they did some, reconnections and whatnot, and now we have just one to maintain, which is good. We also have somebody that works for Peter, Eric Mislevy, who oversees the lead contamination control program that we have, and it's been recognized by the Mass DEP. He works closely with facilities to oversee, lead and copper throughout testing, I should say, for lead and copper throughout our schools and town buildings and all town water fountains. And the consumption for the town of Reading is 45 gallons per capita, which is 30% below the suggested limit of 65 that the state has. So we're still conserving a lot of water, which is good. And that's our water conservation program. To date, we've had over 4,300 rebates given for totaling $628,000. So the people in Reading really take advantage of that, and they should. It's a great program. And we have a lot of information on our website about it, and we always encourage people to use it whenever they can. Next slide. That's our water usage. As you can see, it came down from last year, thankfully. I think people went back to work. So we had this huge jump last year, and it's pretty much in line with where we saw FY 18-19. So still higher than in some years, but definitely a nice decrease from last year. And our Soar is 108 miles of Soar. We have 12 pump stations. We have a master plan for the 12 pump stations that was developed in 2010. We're just recently talking about dusting that plan off and seeing if the timing still works for those remaining 8 stations, because we're in the middle of replacing Sturgis right now. And then there's about 4 years roughly before we go to our next one, which would have been Joseph Way according to that 2010 master plan. But we're getting a little bit of a few issues at Brewer Lane, so we started saying, is that the right sequence and is the timing right? So we're going to try to do that this year for some short money, just have that plan sort of relooked at. And let's see, stormwater. That's rainwater or melted snow that runs off streets and goes into open ditches and discharges untreated. And that's why, we always talk about, the various chemicals on lawns and that type of stuff. So all of that would just go in. So back in 2003, the EPA issued this NIPDES permit. You can see what that means down at the bottom. And it regulates that discharge. And since then, we have sampled and inspected all of our outfalls throughout town, which is part of the requirement. We've created a GIS app to monitor the sediment in all of the catch basins. We have done an awful lot of education and outreach. And in 2021, I want to recognize Alex Rosiski, who is our senior civil engineer, and he's our stormwater guy. And so with his spearheading this program and being a part of this Mystic River Watershed Association, we were recognized and given an EBC award for leadership. So the town of Reading was. In 2022, you're going to see that the Reading Stormwater Enterprise Fund is going to be nationally recognized in a case study by the EPA. And all of that really is, Alex just taking a lead role in this, which we're really thankful for his work. So some of the challenges we face, quite same as in the regular general fund, it's acquiring and retaining staff. And in training, I put in that because with the water division, we have distribution licenses that are very difficult to get and are sought after by other communities. So, we train our guys. Of course, we want them trained, and then, they're valuable to other employees. So we've lost several, like I said, this past year. That division is also dealing with materials shortages and aging infrastructure. I'm sure everybody heard about Walker's Brook Drive. I'm sure there's other water mains that are in that condition. our work is never, it's not a happy type of work. It's based on working with National Grid and trying to get timing right with paving and not digging up. So it's always just this balance that the guys are dealing with, and it's congestion, noise, inconvenience. People don't like it. I get it. So the summary of the level 1 is there is no change in staffing for water, sewer, or stormwater. Pretty much we've level funded. The one difference is in water. I put in about $100,000 to help with an emergency contract in case we cannot. Right now, we only have 2 guys left in the water department that can do emergency water main breaks, and they are working ridiculous hours sometimes, which is unsafe, and so we have to do some. We've outsourced it. We may have to continue to do some outsourcing until we can get staff trained. And Peter's doing a great job in training some new people, but it normally takes up to a couple of years to get them fully trained on what he needs them for. So in the interim, we may have to do some outsourcing, which we've never really had to do before. So that's unique. And I don't know that 100, that all depends on how many water main breaks that they can't handle, right? And it's really focused around when we're doing snow and ice operations and the guys are doing that. Sometimes in the middle of winter, they have to stop that and go do a water main break. Well, those are the times we might look at saying, you can't be doing, 30 plus hours, 40 hours, so we're going to outsource it. So that was put in there. And I think the last page just kind of gives you a highlight of the various percentage increases and where they are, and that's where you see under water distribution expenses that additional 100,000, and pretty much everything else is. The stormwater salary is also, that's kind of a unique situation. We had a short-term employee leave and somebody who was a long-term employee who decided he wanted to have a little less responsibility, so he took a downgrade. So that's where you see that huge increase, because his salary was higher, but we sort of worked out some of the differences with him. But it was still, it's not really an increase, it's an increase for that division, let's say. And that's about it.
Jane, does the training that your water folks need, is that something that could be done in the new training room at the police station when it's complete? Or is this more like just expenses for training?
No, the training it's very specialized. They go away for it, like for the day. But it's more that it's not just a one day. It's weeks of training for distribution licenses. So, and just it's a skill set that's kind of developed, right? So unfortunately, it's not just a one day type of thing or even a couple of days. It's, they study for weeks and months, for these licenses.
Okay, thank you. Other question, Chris?
Thanks, Karen. And thanks, Jane. Yeah, hopefully that these positions can be filled, because definitely the schooling in the snow and whatnot, hopefully we don't get a lot of snow, but
I know.
It'll probably snow tomorrow for all I know. I just want to give a special thank you to whomever fixed the patch of the 1-inch gap outside of Coolidge on Birch Meadow Drive. That was, like 6 months over there, just constantly I'd be tripping over that thing, walking to school and whatnot. You'd think I would have learned my lesson the first time. Whoever repaired that, thank you to them.
Okay, I'll let them know.
I do not. I just assumed, like everyone else, that this would be, addressed at some point, and it was.
Let's do a commercial for C-Click Fix.
Yes.
So I noticed that I almost make it out of the miscellaneous category with the number of times that I use C-Click Fix. But it's great because it's an app on your phone. You take a picture of the issue. It knows the address. You tell them what the issue is. Boom. And I get an acknowledgement saying we see what the issue is, and then usually 2 or 3 days later, I get a note said it's been resolved.
That's awesome. I haven't tried it on my phone yet.
Oh, it's
Okay.
great.
All right.
We love it. It's a great tracking tool, and
Okay.
you know, you can disseminate the message to several people, the right people. So yeah, it's a great little program.
Perhaps I should have did that earlier.
Next time you can try it.
Yes. I'm gonna walk around with my phone just taking pictures for you. So,
Oh, gee, thanks.
you're welcome. Only in the winter though, when it snows.
Questions from the FinCom or other select board members? Oh, yes, please.
Joe McDonald, just a quick question.
Sure.
On the outsourcing, right, how would that work? Would you, like, would it be difficult to get someone in an emergency, like, you know, to help? Or are you thinking like you'd backfill, like, some of the lesser functions, like, I'm just curious, like, how you would use that 100,000?
So I actually didn't get the message. The question was kind of echoey.
Oh, sorry, you know, I was just asking like how you'd spend, like, you know, the 100,000 for outsourcing? Like,
Right,
would that
okay.
be like backfilling, like, you know, more of the basic functions in some of the roles? Or
No, that would be, so we would call up a company, because other communities do this all the time. We've just been really lucky where our guys fix all of it, right? But a lot of cities and towns don't have the trained staff and with the licenses to be able to do this, so they contract out. They'll call up Gurnice or whatever to say, hey, you know, do all of our water main breaks for us. So we've never had to do that, and it's very costly, you know, because most of it is emergency work. You know, it's in the middle of the night, it's cold, it's not pretty, and so you get charged for that type of stuff. But no, it's not to pay our guys, it's to pay another company because our guys just, you know, aren't able to do it because of either timing with a snow event or, you know, just a safety issue where we've had times in past years, thank God we've had the staff, but we've had night after night after night of water main breaks. And so you can't have the same person, 2 people doing that.
And do you think there's like risk with the 2 people that are in that role then? Like if they are getting, call it, burnt out and overworked in that role, like do you think you'll have to use that money in emergency anyways, or? Like I'm trying to figure out yeah.
Maybe come
You
up
definitely
to
can talk to the owl.
Sorry, no, it wasn't that. No. I'm just trying to figure out, like, it sounds like there's like a risk there with just 2 people, like, if I hear it right, like in the, you know, supporting like that type of situation, like if there were.
Right, because you just can't have 2 people that are sharing that level of constant emergency work, especially they're coming into work all day, and for some reason, water main breaks don't seem to happen 7 to 3, right? So for the most part, we get them nights, we get them weekends. So when you only have 2 people that are able to respond to it, that's not enough staff. You know, we've lost 3 or 4 in the past year. So we would normally rotate staff, or something would happen, they would be able to do the work a lot faster because there'd be a half a dozen guys, right? So, and we really can't pull in from other divisions because of the level of skill that's needed, they just don't at all do similar work. And then we talked about, well, maybe we could start training some people from other divisions, but you can train them to maybe dig a hole or to help with some things, but for the most part, the skill set we need are folks that have these distribution licenses that just know how to work with the water mains and shutoffs and whatnot, so.
No, that's helpful. Yeah, no, it just sounds like a big risk. So
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Well, just to clarify though, although there's been employees departing, there are employees currently in the job, but they're just new, as Jane pointed out. They've not gone through the licensing and the training. So So it's not necessarily lack of bodies, it's lack of skilled bodies that will just take time to develop.
Yeah, we have replaced some of the skilled folks with some newer employees, although we still have a couple of openings in those divisions. But yeah, it's, and they've been really accelerated in their training, and it's been probably 5-6 months. And, one of them is actually going to be probably able to do call within the next month, and that's unheard of. It usually takes, like we said, a year and a half, 2 years to get them fully trained to be able to do a call on their own, at least to be able to respond to a call, and then they'll, depending on what it is, they'll call in support staff, so.
Thank you. I keep hearing all that extra money from the state for ARPA are still focused on water and sewer infrastructure. So I definitely think we should keep our eyes on that. I take your point that, we've done a lot of work, but we still have an aging infrastructure, and we're not alone, obviously.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, I don't see any questions here, Bob. If anybody has any hands raised on your end?
Oh.
Okay, Sharon, sorry.
Thanks,
Jane, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
I'll finish up with the rest of the costs that are under the town side of government, but not specifically in any one of the departments that's gone, and they're called shared costs. And, for FinCom and everyone's benefit, I'll take a couple steps backwards just to sort of give you all an overview. Is that slide coming through okay?
Yes.
Okay. So from the financial forum, we had almost a 3% increase in revenues. It scaled down to operating budgets of just over 4%. And the budgets you've seen tonight and last week from the towns, we have $32 million to work with. And I'll explain later how much was requested, a 3.7% increase for town budgets. One subset of costs is the accommodated costs, and then one subset of those are shared costs. So the shared costs are benefits, capital, debt, and then the FinCom reserve fund, as well as vocational education. So accommodated costs are going up 2.6%. The shared costs are going up 3.4%. And I'm now going to step through each of those at a reasonably quick pace. If anyone has any questions, since I can't necessarily see you all, it's just best to shout out a question. Benefits is by far the largest. Shared cost, $20-odd million, up 5%. I'm going to get into the detail of the first two items a little bit more, but you can see that it's the retirement cost that's driving the 5% increase. Some of the smaller things I will not get much into are Medicare, which has been flat for a couple of years, workers' comp, which is a relatively low cost issue. 111F indemnification is effectively workers' comp for police and fire. It's also pretty well in hand, knock on wood. And lastly, unemployment benefits, which is really hard to peg these last couple of years because of some of the fraud. So moving a little more in depth into the health insurance, it's driven by premiums. You can see out of the 12 million, almost all of it is premiums. There's a chunk left over in a variety of pots that only add up to $500,000. We're forecasting the premiums will probably go up more than 1.8%. We won't know until February, but the budget will only need to go up less than 2%. We have some slack in the budget right now for a couple of reasons. One is the premium holidays, which we talked about. The town is going to save between the RMLD, the enterprise funds, and the general fund about $1 million in health insurance premiums this year. But that does not change the run rate. That's just cash saved this year, which is great. It goes back to free cash. It goes back to water reserves, sewer reserves. We actually used a few $100,000 at one of the fall town meetings to balance the budget. But we still, believe that the premium rate of higher than 2% can be balanced with the remaining funds. This will be the last chance I really get to do this. So I really want to tip my cap to all the employees. There's 15 unions in the school and the town and the light department. Many of them have been on this group for more years. I've been here 16 years. They were on it before I got here. So there's plenty of folks with a lot of experience. There's a few new people. It's been a very effective group. Management and labor working side by side. You know, we each pay a share. We each have the objective to minimize the total cost, not just minimize our side at the extent of someone else. We have actually paid out an annual rate of less than 3% over the last 10 years. So that includes health insurance premiums as well as employment growth. And over the 10 years, we do have more employees both in the schools and the town. So that's really quite an impressive figure. And that's the figure that most communities are most concerned about, or at least pre-pandemic, was health insurance premiums. We've done it about as well as you can. Retirement, as Sharon mentioned in last year's budget presentation, as well as the prior year, in order to shorten the period of when the retirement is fully funded, the local retirement board voted an increase, a sharp increase, I believe it was last year, right in the middle of the pandemic, and then they backed off a little, which was nice at our request. But annual costs, as you can see here, 6.5%. So that's the run rate until the pension is fully funded, somewhere around 2030. So we have less than 10 years. The big jump here is going back to, if you will, I won't say fully funding, but funding OPEB a little bit better. During the pandemic, for 2 years in a row, we cut that funding to $100,000. We were able to supplement that during the middle of each year and put more money into it. But each year had started out just $100,000. This year, I believe we're financially healthy enough to start it out at $500,000, which was sort of the long-term objective. The actual run rate of OPEB is just under $2 million in the general fund, so we are not fully funding it. And again, the theory was once the pension is fully funded by, say, around 2030, then we can turn our attention to fully fund OPEB. And the gap between the savings that the annual pension fund will have and the amount that OPEB will require will have leftover funds in the millions of dollars. So it should be reasonably afforded to fully fund OPEB at a better pace starting that.
Bob, what's OBRA?
That's for, there it is. That's for setting up 403Bs for seasonal workers. So if kids work in the summer and they only work, might earn $1,000, they are required to have a retirement fund. So we set up the retirement fund for them, and then they're allowed to withdraw it at the end of the summer, for instance, if they choose. Some choose to get it, some choose to keep it. That's just the administration cost. It's a tiny amount compared to the OPEB. It's I don't know, $40,000 or $50,000, if that.
Thank you.
I'll spend a little more time than usual on capital and debt because I know that's been a hot topic in the fall. The combination of capital and debt is slightly lower, down about 1%. As was certainly discussed at 2 town meetings, the debt share is going up, capital is going down. And to just keep in mind that the debt is more or less half and half between stuff being done inside the levy and then excluded debt outside the levy. As we mentioned, at least the FinCom chair and the vice chair recently, the debt issuance that was done in November came out very well. We ended up spending $1,430,000 less than what was budgeted, and that's over many years. That's over 15 years. So that savings leaves more room for capital because again, we're following FinCom policy. So if you save money issuing debt, then it goes towards capital. In FY23, we actually have to find a little bit more money to pay the debt than was projected, but every other year it's down. It's 60,000 lower the year after, 200,000 in FY32, and then scales back to 50,000. So it's just good news all around. I have to strong arm the town accountant on FY23. We'll have to work on that. This is an overview of what FinCom has asked to do over the last few years. They have a 5% policy. We're in the second year of a plan of 3 years to do closer to 5.5%. So you can see in FY23 next year will be the middle of the 2 years, and then FY24 is planned to be the last of the 3 years to spend a little more money on debt and capital, specifically debt because of low interest rates. And then the capital plan that you'll see in April, or you'll see during the budget process this winter, is back to 5% starting in FY25. So in order to figure out how to do this, first of all, you start with what debt already exists. So here's some figures for debt that we've already issued. It's not a plan, it's this debt is issued. We have to pay it. So if you start with 5.9 million in FY23 and subtract 3.2 million, rounded, you get 2.6 million. So we know that that's available either for capital or for new debt, and so on and so forth. And the actual plan that you'll see is this is the amount of capital that's planned, and this is very close to what FinCom has seen in the past, other than we have that debt savings. And then this is new debt plan. Here's an overview of the debt. I'm certainly not going to read it, but it just gives you a flavor for what's going on. We have $2 million inside the levy last year or the current year. It is going to go up. We've mentioned some of the new projects that just got approved. It's going up to 3 million, and then it'll drop right back down. Again, sort of consistent with FinCom's request, back to the $2 million level in FY26. So we'll have a couple of years of higher debt service. Again, this was all planned. What is on the capital plan, again, is a plan, but definitely needs more work, is three different things. One is community sustainability, and that's what we discussed with performance contracting, is that just pretty much arbitrarily said, let's put $1 million in the capital plan and let the community figure out what it wants to do. You know, it has time. It's clearly a conversation that has not happened yet, but should happen. And, you know, this plan would call for that conversation to happen over the next year. Same with economic development downtown, phase 2, if you will. A couple of years ago, staff identified improvements, both engineering and planning working together, of about $7 million in possible improvements. $5 million was put in a state bond bill, which may or may not get funded, and $2 million we have had in the capital plan for some time. But that's another community conversation that has to happen. The sustainability may have reasons to rush, but there's no logical reason. Economic development downtown has a logical reason of the road. Haven Street is going to be paved. The water and sewer and stormwater work will be done in approximately 18 months, and so the road will be paved. So it's an awfully good time to have your plans and what you want to do for a streetscape before you pave it. Birch Meadow Fields, phase 1. As was mentioned earlier, the consulting money has been approved by the fall town meeting. I was able to put a couple $1 million, the entire amount of what's thought to be phase 1 into the plan. I put it starting in FY25 for debt service. The actual project could happen slightly faster. But again, this requires a community conversation. The estimates will come in. The costs will probably change versus the design work done a couple of years ago. And then there'll have to be some sort of back and forth with the community again to design, how fast do we want to do this? What do we want to do? And these three things can all be interchanged. They can be swapped. The timing can be changed. There's nothing magic other than the downtown, needs to be decided because of the paving. I won't go over any of the existing debt because I think, you just sat through some town meetings, but this just, again, gives you a flavor. When debt service ends, that's where there's room for more things, and that's generally how we try to plan it. And you can see this is an interesting column that says, 5 years ago when FinCom started this discussion to what's planned in 27, what's changed? The answer is not very much. We're kind of back to where we started, other than there's 3 new projects that need discussion and may be funded. Importantly, excluded from the levy, you see happily the taxpayers will stop paying this amount just in time for Killam, as we always planned. FY24 is the final payment on the high school and some small amounts for 2 elementary schools. The following year, FY25 is the last payment on the library. So it'll be good to wrap those up. Specifically changes since November town meeting. As you can imagine, capital is pretty much almost a daily thing that changes, and every so often we just have to nail it down and present it. Working with Joe Huggins and Kevin Kabuzzi in facilities, they were able to assess the Coolidge and Birch Meadow roofs and move them up 5 years. They did also increase the costs, but they did deem them not to be as urgent as previously thought, which is great. And honestly, that by itself allowed the Birch Meadow project to quite easily come in sooner than maybe anyone thought. It was never in the capital plan with a funded, now it is. So not only is the design work done, the project will have $2 million, will have space for $2 million. So I would encourage, again, the community, once the work is done on assessing the new costs and some of the new possible work, I'd certainly hope the community has that discussion over a year's period and reaches some conclusions. We added a smaller, roughly small amount of funding for the Rise playground surface. Schools brought that to us attention as a safety concern. So that will be done next summer. And then there's several, as there always is, the several rearrangements of equipment, especially public works equipment in future years that really doesn't have any immediate impact. Specifically for FY23, and this is what a town meeting will share next spring if this is where we end up. You'll see a $12,000 design for the Rise playground safety to be followed the next year by $120,000 cost. Some work on doors and windows, 2 pieces of DPW snow equipment, actually 3 moved around with a net cost of $75,000 more. And I took the Stroud Avenue improvements off the list. There was a lot of objection to that at one of the town meetings, and there's now a parcel that the town owns. So the town needs to kind of decide what to do down in that area. But as pretty much everyone knows, it's a safety issue for pedestrians, for vehicles, and for animals at the compost center. I'll skip this tonight, but there'll also be, as we have to disclose work done in FY24. Importantly, there's something new called an arc flash hazard study that the schools will need to conduct through the facilities department. Town buildings will do it in FY25. We're not sure what will come of that. It's conceivable that more costs could come out. Concerns that I have, we really need to get yeah.
Good question. Oh, actually, you may hit it on that, but getting back to that arc flash,
Yeah.
and so that's done at the schools, you said?
Well, in FY24, it's in the schools, and then in FY25, it would be in the town buildings. It's a smaller dollar figure in FY25.
And so, and am I understanding that correctly? In that if that's a hazard study, is that just looking at safety type of issues?
Yeah, from my understanding, it's just looking at safety, and we have no immediate reason to suspect there's a problem. It's possible this will unearth it, but this is just a new, I think it's either an OSHA or some other safety requirement.
Thanks. And I think I saw the question I was going to ask, I think is on your next slide. So,
okay.
Before you go there, Bob, quick question.
Yeah.
Just generally speaking about the capital that's going in here, how fluent is Sharon with not necessarily the projects themselves, but kind of the mechanics of kind of this process? I'm sorry, I'm thinking about transition and just making sure that someone kind of has a piece of this that they can help transfer. Is Sharon pretty much up to speed on the mechanics here?
Yeah, I'd say, the first line of defense, if you will, is all the department heads. They know best. I follow that. And then, Sharon and Andre certainly know some of it. They'll have to be more plugged in if the next town manager is not going to be. But it's a process absolutely led by the departments. And then certain departments are influenced by volunteers. But, both Andre and Sharon are highly capable of it and they're aware of it, but they're just not involved. They don't sit in necessarily. We had a meeting a week or two ago with a couple of department heads, assistant department heads, and 2 FinCom members. And, we spent a couple hours just talking about capital and the process and so on and so forth. And, it's really a team effort. So, Sharon can easily step in, Andre can step in. That won't be a problem because the knowledge really resides with the department heads.
Yeah, I was by no means disparaging our wonderful finance committee. just thinking about the staff side too, so thank you, you addressed it spot on.
Okay. Sharon, did you want to add anything?
I mean, I just wanted to say that I'm very familiar with how Bob does all of it. The piece that I miss sometimes is all those long conversations of why some of the, so we would have to be more involved in those conversations in order to help figure out what the priorities are and where to put things. But the mechanics of it, we absolutely understand how he does it. It's the, how do you prioritize? And it's usually coming out of those conversations with the department head. The department head knows more than we do, so.
I think
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, the fact that we're having organized discussions about this with the different groups that need to be involved, being involved, is very heartening to me, so thank you.
A couple things that I just have to say before I go. The Killam project needs much more public discussion. There is going to be a spring, either March or April decision made by the SBA. If the decision is Reading is not invited, then I'm wrong, that this discussion doesn't have to speed up. But if it is Reading is invited, then it has to be all cylinders, full speed ahead. Because the timeline that we were shown is potentially that November 2022 town meeting may be asked for design money. And that's a couple $1 million. So that's the fastest. It's probably not likely, but it is a possibility. So, you know, as FinCom sits through the winter budget process, I hope that, you know, just like you guys did with the turf fields, that you just sort of really emphasize that and communicate it to the town. Sometimes those of us in line positions think, how could someone not know this? But they don't always. So. The Parker turf field, this is not a big deal, but we've done a lot of cost estimate updates. We've not done this one. I also don't know what the useful life remaining on the Parker turf field. It's used so much less than the two high school fields. It's never been a concern, a big issue. But you know, someone ought to tackle that and just make sure it's correct in the capital plan. The field house, the high school field house bleachers, that's kind of a twofer. You do both. We have a pretty good recent cost estimate. It's about maybe a year old, maybe a little less. And I've heard community discussions about safety issues. So I just, you know, again, throw that on the table that, you know, this is something that needs to be discussed, and there either is or there isn't safety issues, and there either is or isn't an urgency to this. This is not currently funded in the capital plan, but if it's an urgency, then it should be. And I've already mentioned some of the future projects that have space in the capital plan, the priorities, you know, what are the priorities for the Haven Street redevelopment? That's probably a pretty big community discussion. And again, it's needed within the next 12 to 18 months. That's community sustainability, the Birch Meadow future phases, and as Mark knows, and he's doing a lot of work on a community senior center. So that's kind of an overview of debt and capital. Interestingly, when Jane mentioned all the projects at DPW, all of those projects have been funded. So that's just now the time for the work. So at least, you know, the financial planning part is finished. And now it's time to honestly give DPW a pretty good break for the next few years and let them do their work. And that's the way it's been planned.
Bob, is the field house bleachers, is that about $2.5 million? Is that more? Is that 4?
No, it's a smaller number, and you know, I don't remember, Mark. I'd have to look it up. It's in the capital plan in the notes section.
Okay.
I just don't remember. Joe, if you're on the call, do you remember? For Kevin?
I think it's around $2 million, Bob.
Okay.
Is that bleachers and floor, or is that just bleachers? Sorry, Joe.
It's both.
Oh, great, thank you.
And you know, the bleachers are original to the high school. Well, before the renovation. The floor is what's the safety issue, but you know, those guys do a great job maintaining the bleachers, but they're so old and so outdated and so heavy. If you're going to do the school or the floors, you ought to do the bleachers. I'll finish off the shared costs just as a reminder, especially to Northeast Metro Tech. You know, the Voc school budgets are all going up next year. Some of these are guesses, some of these are known. But $250,000 to $300,000 more will be in the Wakefield Schools budget within a few years if a new school does get passed. I saw the date and I don't remember, but it's sometime in late January. Their school committee has just voted to hold an election. Laura's on the call if she remembers the date. I want to say it's the last week or so in January.
It's January 25th.
Okay, thanks. So again, this, if that goes forward, that's just another cost the budget will need to absorb as was discussed at town meeting. So I'll stop there and ask, are there any other questions before we wrap it up?
Bob?
Yeah.
Hi. Is there a plan B after the election if the town's voted down?
Not that I'm aware of, no. They're gonna have to develop it. They've been asked that and they said, not really, no. I mean, they won't build a school. They'll have to try to get whatever feedback they can from why it was a no and move forward. And, one would assume that the no would be it's too expensive as opposed, because everybody knows they need a new school.
Right.
It's just gonna be, do something more affordable somehow.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Chris?
Thanks, Aaron. So Bob, they would be reimbursing us the cost of the election though? Is that the way that works?
Yeah, that's right. I think they plan on roughly 6 hours or so. They pay for the, identifiable costs. So what we have to do is, not only provide the staff, but also take away the high school gymnasium for the chunk of that day. So there's soft costs to be absorbed, but they pay the hard costs.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see any other questions here. Any hands raised?
I don't see any, so I'll wrap it up. Let me share this.
Well, could I ask you one question then?
Of course.
The whole Stroud Ave improvements, you're right. Okay, so, $100,000 paid for, X, and we still have some safety concerns down there. Would it be Jane's group? Could they give us some ideas of what could a smaller budget do to improve safety down there?
Well, what I heard very clearly from some members of conservation was don't do anything down there. So that's a community conversation that has to happen. That was a bit of a surprise, but somebody needs to talk about that.
All right,
I don't see that it's appropriate to plan to spend money until that discussion has happened more fully.
Well, still have that gulag fence down there, so. Okay, fine. Thank you.
So again, as I mentioned just recently, this is the target budget. And before I get to show you how much was spent over the last week by department heads, this is always an interesting time for me to sit through the budget presentations. There's probably nothing said that I didn't know, or very little, I hope. But sitting through it from sort of stem to stern and listening to all the departments is really quite educational for me as well as all of you. The first thing, I just can't help thinking after, first, this happens every year, is what an impressive group this is. And I don't need to butter your bread any more than it's buttered, but they really are. There's so many experts doing things, and I don't know all the details, and I wouldn't want to know all the details. But I'm kind of up at the summary level, occasionally in detail as needed. And you're just not going to find this kind of a cohesive group in other towns. The thing that I'm most proud of is every year in the budget process, department heads reach out and say, you know what, I can do without the thing I asked you for because so-and-so needs it more. And that applies both to the operating budget and capital. That does not happen in other towns. It's a food fight. I need this, I need this, I need this. We don't work that way. That's something that I'm really proud of, and I hope that continues. But here's what they asked for. Purely based on what you saw, I have to cut $336,000 away, which is not easy because you didn't hear a lot of things that were like, well, that's silly. We don't need to do that. Here's the things that I'll be going through, and I want to ask the board for some help. first of all, are there any other additions to the budget that we need? And I can think of one right off the top, and there's others that are discussed. I want to put more money into funding the results of the pay and class study. Matt described how we put 50,000 in. That was a product of new growth that came in late in the fall, and it was an easy thing to just say, let's direct it there. We need to, retain people before we can hire them. And the cost of not retaining them is just enormous. And to the extent that some of it is pay, we just need to make sure that the next town manager has some sort of tools to be able to look at the results of a pay and class study, which should be available in late spring, not for annual town meeting, but certainly for November town meeting. And start saying, how do I spend however much money is set aside? So I really do want to add some more funds. Ed, do you want to ask a question related to that?
I did. It was actually on the point, just at the top line, that reduction that's needed, that, just over 1%, 300, how does that compare to like past years, just out of curiosity?
It's probably in line. I remember like 250 to 400 something. In this year, though, it's a little distributed a little differently. It's pretty much all Gene and Matt. Other years it's been more spread out with various departments. This year it's pretty much both of them. And a fair amount of it is related to work with volunteer boards. Certainly not a bulk of it, but that's a common theme. I'm doing minutes tonight somehow. We have a hard time hiring staff for working extra for things like this. So that's just one of those little things that has to be solved.
Thanks, Bob.
After we all figure out what additions, and there's a couple emails from conservation today. Once we determine what the additions are, then that 336 will go up. So we're going to have to cut 400,000 or 500,000 or whatever the number is. First thing I will do is examine and prioritize any new positions. That's something we always do. Municipal governments generally are not zero-based. We don't start from scratch every year. It's not practical. But we're always constantly looking at positions, especially when they're vacant. Is this necessary? So that the work on existing positions is continuous. It happens all the time. It's been happening. But the discussion about new positions, it's new. So it really hasn't happened. Now, I'm pretty familiar with all the new positions proposed and the reasons, but this is discussions that I'll have to drill even further down with the department heads. And I've done a fair amount of that in the last week. We're gonna have to look for, are there any way to change our service delivery model? So, Jane mentioned, gee, we don't have the staff. Maybe we need to outsource something. Pretty much outsourcing is always more expensive. Sometimes it's the right answer though. Outsourcing provides staff flexibility that you can't with people. So if all of a sudden you need one person to do it and all of a sudden you need 7 people to do it, how do you hire for that? You can't solve that problem in-house. So we have to examine, is the ebb and flow of some of our services require that flexibility, and is there a better way? And not necessarily a cheaper way. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, it probably isn't. I've made it clear to the new health director today that, public health and related services to public health are a priority. I've already told him that the clerical assistance he's asked for is the #1 priority in this budget. It will be funded. Don't ask me how. So the 336 number goes up by another 40 or 50,000. I just think that's really important, and I don't really think I need to explain why. Some of the things you heard tonight and last week perhaps can be scaled into, and then some of them are one-time costs. Generally speaking, I don't like to fund one-time costs in the operating budget when they're a big number. To the extent you could line up 7 one-time costs and do 1 a year for 7 years, that's great. That's not usually how it works. So I'll look at these and say, that's a one-time cost. Why don't we just go to an April or a November town meeting and ask for that to be funded outside the budget cycle? That's one example. And there's not a lot of these in the budget, but there's definitely a few. And then, if I'm not finding a balance, is this something we need to cut? Do we need to cut a service? Generally, when we need to make cuts, the first question I ask the department heads is, look at your vacant positions and tell me what you could live without. Because we'd much prefer to cut a vacant position than someone that's in a job. And in the back of my mind always, with the budget, it's, we're in the service business. But in the back of my mind is always, what can we do to make things better in the future, cheaper in the future, or better service in the future? So, I always look at this money as an investment. I remember having some really nice discussions with the former superintendent, Pat Scatini, and Peter Heckenblecker and I. And we had some real philosophical differences. Pat would always say for education, if I get that money and can spend it next year and then I can't spend it ever again, that's at least one set of kids that I've benefited. And I understand that. I don't think municipal government's like that. We don't want to offer a service to some residents for 1 year and then have to pull it back. I just don't. I think it's fundamentally different. So we try not to go out and do things that we know are not sustainable. And obviously the pandemic would be different. You had to do whatever you had to do for the pandemic. But in terms of services, you just want to be really careful about offering things that aren't sustainable. I will email the select board. I still need some time to look at the budgets for another week or so. But every year I create a list. Sometimes it's a cut list, sometimes it's an add list. This year I'll just start with the budgets you saw, and I'll make a cut list. And I'll just list all the things that have been asked for that are new, that are significant in dollar change. You haven't had all of them described to you. There's some changes that might have been $10,000 that didn't really deserve a mention. I'll try to give you a pretty good list. In talking to Karen, she's very amenable to having a discussion at the first meeting in January, on January 4th, welcoming in visitors in terms of other boards and committees to make such requests. I would encourage them to make them now. Send me an email, send the select board an email, make your feelings known now. And then on the 4th, I will have asked the board to make priorities. And again, we've had a good result in the past with, what's most important on the things you see in the list. And I think it's going to be a little harder this year. There's a natural feeling of enthusiasm, trying to rebound out of the pandemic. But the reality is this town does not have, infinite resources to spend. And, I've taken a crack at cutting the budgets. I have not yet found a way for it to balance. So it's going to take work and it's going to take discussion. Some important deadlines: January 31st, the school committee will deliver a budget to the town manager, to me. It doesn't have to be balanced. Some years John would balance it, some years he didn't. When it wasn't balanced, he would make it clear this budget is so many $100,000 over FinCom's guidance. If we have to cut it, this is what I would do. And I know Tom knows that. He knows the history. And it's totally up to the superintendent and then ultimately the school committee to decide what kind of a budget they want to vote. That's totally their call. I then need to send a balanced budget. So I take the school budget, whether it's balanced or not, and I have to balance a budget and send it to FinCom in late February, and I'll do that. The reason I chose late February is I think for a new town manager, that's the best way to learn the job, to learn the town. The new town manager will meet with FinCom in March and then April town meeting, and it won't be their fault at all. It'll be my fault. Whatever happened is my fault. But this is the best learning tool for how to sort of adapt to the budget process in Reading. When I started, it wasn't fair because I was already here doing a lot of the budget process. Peter wanted to leave right after the annual town meeting with a similar thought, that let the new person take over after the budget's already passed. I think respectfully that a few months early would give a person a really good learning experience when it's not their fault. So, that's the process I've outlined. For the enterprise funds, I would like to sit down with the select board probably at the first meeting in February and discuss water sewer rates. We have some uncertainty. Jane showed you the drop off in water usage. I'm still not sure how that's going to translate into what the MWRA charges us. We're going to have a discussion about reserve policy. Right now, very preliminary work suggests that water rates are going to have to go up, even with a healthy use of reserves, about 10%. But sewer rates can probably go up 0. So you're looking at a combination of 5, which historically is okay, not great. But everyone saw all the projects in water, all the emergency spending in water. It's time to pay for that. I'll leave some notes for the next town manager. It's often helpful to schedule the water, sewer, stormwater rates hearing before town meeting so that the results can get into the warrant. I've listed the dates it's happened. Last year it was a little bit slower. Other years it's generally been March. So if a new town manager can pull that off in March, I think it would be very helpful for town meeting to know when they're looking at the budgets what the rates are, but it's not an absolute requirement. And that's really all I have. Again, I'll reach out to the board probably either just before or after the holidays and give you a list and welcome all of your feedback. And I ask all the volunteer boards, we've heard from 3 of them so far, I believe. If there's things you're interested in, whether it's one-time capital, whether it's some kind of an operating expense, just let us know. And lastly, the town manager has a reserve fund every year. It's been bumped up in the last couple of years because of COVID. I've committed $10,000 to a day to help start his document scanning project now, to start it as soon as possible. We'll probably propose a reduction in that amount from $30,000, but that has historically been a source for the boards and committees that didn't go through a budget process. So HRAC had an event recently, it cost $1,000 or more, and that's the source of funds. So it's not like nothing can happen if the boards and committees don't go through a budget process. There is a mechanism for that. Any questions from the board especially?
How big is that fund, Bob? The town manager discretionary? Not discretionary, the town manager fund.
Reserve fund.
Reserve fund, thank you.
Yeah.
Do you remember how big it is?
Yeah, it's 30,000 last, right now this year. Historically, it's been more like 15 or 20.
No, that's helpful. Okay. Thank you. Chris?
Okay.
Thanks, Karen. Oh, sorry, Bob, real quick. So the $336,000 deficit or whatever, that includes the prior meeting that we had plus this meeting?
Yes, and that's the general fund. That has nothing to do with water, sewer, stormwater. But yes, that's the 2 nights combined.
Okay.
So we still have to get schools.
Yes.
Yep. All right.
Thanks, Bob.
Any hands raised on your end, Bob?
I do see one from Ed.
Okay, we'd love to hear from Ed.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Bob. I just wanted to echo the thanks to all the department heads. The collaboration that you mentioned before, it's definitely something that you can kind of witness, and the thoroughness of all of them. So I know we thanked them all as you were going through, but I just wanted to give kind of one final one to everybody. I know most of them are on, and just kind of want to echo it. It's maybe kind of like a corny thing to say, but it's kind of a proud moment to kind of see this. And I know it's the first stab at it, but there's some kind of tougher decisions that are coming. But it's this was really impressive. So I'm always thankful to be a part of it. So just thanks to everybody.
Bob?
Hi, Carlo, go for it.
Oh, thanks. I just want to know what drawer the manual is going to be in.
Wherever my head is, that's where the manual is.
Well,
Peter left me 1.5 pages of notes, and it wasn't because it was me. That's what he left for the next town manager, whoever it might be. I'll try to improve on that.
oh, that would be great. Thanks.
Awesome.
Perhaps 2 pages.
Okay, thank you. That was a lot of work.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Also in the packet tonight for folks watching at home, the Climate Advisory Committee sent us some more information that the Select Board had requested the last time they came before us. I didn't see any minutes. Did I miss some?
No minutes. We're on the agenda.
Yes.
So we'll
just checking.
have 2 nights of budgets and 2 nights of town manager hiring at your first meeting in January.
Okay.
And no word from Caitlin, just to follow up on that.
Okay, so the last item on our agenda is just to discuss how well our most recent communication policy changes have gone. Chris, you want to start?
Yes, thanks, Sharon.
Hey Karen, do you mind if we,
Oh, no.
I adjourn FinCom?
Okay. Go for it.
Can I get a motion from, all the members, please?
Move to adjourn?
Thanks, Mary Ann. Have a second?
Got a second from
Thanks.
Joe? Okay.
Great, I know who's in the room. Joe?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jean? Jackie? Oh, Jackie's gone, I'm sorry. Mary Ann?
Yes.
And Ed, yes. So that's 6-0. Thanks very much.
Thank you very
Karen.
much.
Apologies for the disruption there.
No, good questions. Thank you, Brian. It's a long night.
Thank
Always a pleasure to see y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to a number of the Conservation Commission members that also came tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you. And joined us, we're watching at home, or it's hard to tell what's going on in Zoom land. Thank you. Bye. Okay.
Okey dokey. So yeah, back at our August 10th meeting, we ended up changing the communication policy pertaining to the emails within the packet. And then towards the end of the meeting, it was mentioned that we just review it 60 days from that date, and obviously other things come up, so nothing really ever happens on time. So essentially what the biggest change obviously was the emails being removed from the packet and seeing how it is. And the line item that was struck from the thing would be emails pertaining to the agenda, et cetera. So I, at the time, made the comment that I didn't think there would be, how would someone put an email that had to pertain to the agenda? I didn't think it was feasible that stuff like that would end up making it in to begin with. And then ironically, the amount of emails that we received pertaining to agenda items actually seemed to warrant just a discussion around including it back in to the packet. So I know it's been nice and small compared to the way that it's been before. I just think that we should see about doing something pertaining to this. So I reached out to Laura and Bob, and then apparently Every is going to be changing some stuff come in January, I believe, which was mentioned. So this is more of how we want to do it on our end, and then getting something done after the fact on theirs, if anything is done. So I know for me that I would like at a minimum to see at least items pertaining to the agenda back into the packet. As opposed to all the emails, again, it's up for discussion, but I think at a minimum, we should just be including that. But that is just my opinion. So I sent the edited policy to Bob, the line item that had the clean version for ease. So I think that was Ann or somebody came up with whatever this red thing is. So I don't know if Bob can bring it up on the screen. But, so obviously I didn't do this, but this entire paragraph that's in there, I think could just be included back in the way that it was. So I don't know if you want to bring that.
So before we do that, could I make a suggestion? Could we at least poll the board and see what people, so we've heard from you, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, let's poll the board and see how other members feel. Mark, you wanna go next?
Sure. So I think that the change in policy actually did what it was intended to do. It actually worked really well. I don't know how we would decide what should be in or shouldn't. I think that given that most Most communities don't include. We're still getting all the emails. The secretary responds at least with an acknowledgement to all the emails, and I suspect that board members are responding when they need to or want to. I actually think that the change is working. I'm not sure what we need to bring back, what the benefit is. Things that pertain to the agenda we talk about, because they're on the agenda. I would not want to change it back. I have no idea what's in the red, but I don't see a need to change it from where it is. The one outstanding question, I think, was what impact on public records requests can we attribute to the change, if there's a way to separate those. And I don't know if, Laura, you might have any way to answer that question or estimate?
So I currently have two open public records requesting that all of the select board members' emails, all 5 individually and as a group. And I have sent out one request since this change. The time that it takes to do the public records requests increases drastically compared to the time that it takes to print it to put it into the packet. But I'd also like to point out that it's a matter of either myself as a public records management is going to be doing the work or Caitlin's going to be doing the work. Either way, someone's going to be providing those emails. The public records request portion of being most time consuming is going through and reading all of those emails and providing them with the fact that it usually generates a file that's quite large that can't necessarily be emailed. Mm-hmm. So it definitely has impacted it. In short answer, it has impacted the public records request greatly.
So greatly meaning 5%, 10%, 50%?
From a time perspective, so again, there's only been 3 public records requests for select board emails from the same individual.
From the same individual. Okay, thank you.
It sounds like the scope of those requests is beyond what we would routinely put in our packets. It's not just like what were the emails that came into the select board at ci.reading.ma.us. It was, so even if we restored our old policy, that still wouldn't be the full scope of what's being requested.
That is correct. That is correct. But pulling them from the packet is what prompted those requests. The last request the one I have provided took me approximately 8 hours to do because of having to go through and make sure that everything, and that doesn't include IT's time because the IT director, Kevin, needs to go pull those records out. He pulls out the duplicates. I then go through and make sure that everything is public record, that there's nothing in there from town council, et cetera. And I have to read each individual email.
And isn't there maybe I don't understand this right, but I thought if up to a certain amount of either time or pages or something was provided at no charge, and if it was more than that, then there were costs associated.
The first 2 hours we have to provide as a free service. We can charge $25 per hour beyond that, providing that we provide the records on time. In this case, the records were not provided on time due to scheduling. I just didn't have the time to provide them on time. That means that when I stayed on time, that means within 10 days of the date of the request. If we don't provide it within that 10 days, we cannot charge.
Got it. I mean, is that something that would merit outside resources? Can outside resources help? What are the ways that we could expedite something like that? If, to get it off your plate, and if it's a very large request, seems like it'd be better not being on your plate.
Well, that's something that we can talk about. I believe that if we use outside resources, the best would be to use, we definitely have to find someone that knows the law and has the ability to be able to read the information that's not public record. I would suggest using town council's office to do that, and that's going to be quite costly.
Yeah, no, $25 an hour is not gonna quite cover that.
And what was the time period of that request? Was it like 3 months or since August, or? I'm just wondering how many pages, like the one person?
The first request was, I don't remember the exact dates, but it was less than a month. It was from the date of the very first packet that was issued without the emails to sometime in September. It was like a 3-week period. Currently, I have a request that is for from September to December 12th. And then I have another, until December 10th. And then I have another request from December 10th on to current date. So basically, you're talking 3 months. That's going to take another 8 to 10 hours.
No, I just like, and I'm listening to this, and we should probably finish going on and giving our comments. I'm like, I don't see what that has to do with our packet. That was a blanket request for all of the communications all of the select board members have ever made. So, I mean, it's not even related to the packet. It's just it's a different type of request, and I feel for you having to even do that.
So, Bob, real quick question. Is it true that currently there's a list created of all the emails that goes into the packet?
No. I create a list, sometimes Caitlin helps, of all emails that are from residents directed to the board about an issue. So if a vendor is trying to sell the board something, that's not in there. If town council or I are emailing, if a board member has asked that this be forwarded to the whole board, that's not in there. So it's a subset. It's customer service. It's residents asking the board or expressing an opinion to the board. Those are listed.
And this public records request includes all of those?
They would certainly be a subset of that, yep. And then as Mark mentioned as secretary, his responses are included when he's asking town staff to help in some way. It's all under the board's policy. For the board's benefit, town council had asked me a few weeks ago, I think Karen knows this, for adding a draft agenda item on January 4th to prepare for the hearing later in January if needed. And I've talked to her for the last 2 days. She's learned some things that are going on. It may or may not be worth the board having an executive session on this topic in early January, just so you're aware.
I'm sorry, what topic is this? You said a hearing?
Public records requests.
Oh, okay. All right.
I don't, it could be executive session, it's not clear yet. But, you may need to prepare for mediation in some way. So she just asked for some time as a placeholder on the January agenda. That's the only meeting you have before the scheduled mediation.
Okay, all right.
If we were to, I think my concern with Chris's proposal is that it would actually create more work, and it also doesn't have any kind of clear, it's not necessarily easy to administer. It would, anything that's relating to what's in the packet, then that's going to either put town staff and or town council in the position of having to make a judgment call about what emails that come in are related to the agenda. And I think that part of the impetus for removing the emails entirely was because our previous policy had some language in there that required some amount of judgment call, whether it was something was on the advice of counsel, it was too amorphous, it was hard to administer, it sort of opened us up to criticism, whereas our current policy is very clean. I'm also not convinced that if we went back to the old way of doing things, it's going to mean that suddenly the public records request from the one individual would stop, given that those requests exceed what we were putting out in the packet. I do like that the packet no longer serves as a political weaponization or does not serve as a tool for political weaponization. I'm glad that we're not currently proactively putting out emails that we're receiving from different factions trying to score political points. I think that that's sort of healthy and has been beneficial, I hope, for town civic dialogue to not be proactively putting out sort of some of that sparring that was happening within our packet that we were then publishing. So that's sort of my initial thought. Those are my initial thoughts.
Thank you. Carlo?
Yeah, thank you. I don't disagree with anyone that's spoken previous to me, but to Mark's point, we solved the problem and then we created a problem. And the problem is we don't deal with it, unfortunately. Laura and staff are dealing with it, and I can't think of a fix. I mean, this particular individual is never going to stop, ever. So that's our challenge. And yeah, we could go back to the old way for 6 months, see what happens. I don't think anything's going to change, but given the recent emails from this particular individual, I don't know if we're even going to have mediation. I don't know. I know it's scheduled, but it seems to be going in the wrong direction. So he's never going to be satisfied, no matter what the case is. But this was my concern to begin with. Many months ago, was all these public records requests from this individual and others to burden town staff. And I know Laura has mentioned in the past to hire a public records officer, other than her, and that just adds creates a little layer, not a layer, but creates another job that we shouldn't need. I know some towns have it. But unfortunately, I don't have an answer to solve that problem. But I don't think it's fair to any chair and vice chair or town council to spend that kind of money to say, okay, this pertains to the agenda, this doesn't. And some are obvious that pertain to the agenda.
Right.
It's from a committee. It's from another committee. There's some that are obvious. And then there's going to be judgment calls. So depending who the chair is, then we and other boards are going to fight amongst themselves. Hey, why wasn't this included?
Yeah.
But that's the problem. I get Chris's point, but it's not just this board, it's any future boards, and they can change the policy and do whatever they want. But I love not having the emails in there to what Ann said, the weaponization.
Oops, you froze. Okay. Okay, thank you.
I very much agree with you, Carlo, about not wanting to shift the problem to town staff to have to deal with in the form of public records requests. I don't know if we change I just don't see that if we change the policy back or if we change it to, items pertaining to the agenda, that stops the public records requests either, or that, I think, so I don't know how we change the communications policy in a way that would satisfactorily, satisfy the interest of residents, such that they wouldn't need to be filing voluminous public records requests that take up so much staff time. I'm certainly open, and if you have a thought as to what if you think there is any proposal or language change that would alleviate the burden on staff with these requests that our policy could address.
Yeah, that's the challenge. You know, I agree with you. You know, I feel bad. This has been an ongoing problem.
You know, I don't see any, honestly, I don't see anything that's going to take the burden away. Whether you change the policy or not, you're still going to have the public records request. I think, you know, the only thing that's going to change it is the trust of the people. And, you know, I'm not sure how to get there.
I don't think it's a policy change.
Yeah, that's well said, Laura. That's well said.
It almost feels like there are two things going on, right? We're trying to deal with two things. One is kind of how to best serve the public in terms of information flow. And that's kind of, I think, what the communications policy was. And the second piece is more this outgrowth, which has been more and more public relations, or public records, thank you, public records requests, which is not just a Reading phenomenon, if I understand correctly. We know, we've heard from the police chief that it's a huge issue that they are having to deal with also. You know, that's a problem that we need to think about, you know, what can we do to help? Part of it can be definitely, you know, maybe it's trust, but part of it is some people, you know, want to approach things that way. I think we need to be careful not to kind of craft how we communicate and gather information with public records requests. And one of the things that I think the pandemic changed in terms of how we work is we used to be talking to the community kind of on a regular basis, kind of having office hours, if you will, more formally. And we kind of have stopped that. And that might be something that we bring back onto the table, is kind of how do we do that? And in person, great. And, you know, if it's not going to be possible that way, you know, remotely. But we haven't, you know, none of us have really done that in quite a while. I think that we never got lots and lots of people coming in, but when there were people that really had something on their mind, I did have people that came and would share and bring it in that way and have the chance to talk one-on-one with some folks. And maybe that's one of the things that we want to kind of bring back in terms of opening other forms of communication. I think that, you know, the packet's been more manageable. I think there have been fewer comments coming in, but not zero. I think that a lot of them have been on point, if you will, and less weaponized. And I think that's a real bonus. I think that allows us all to do, you know, the business of the town, which is what we need to do. So I think that, you know, I don't know that we've learned anything in the 6 months, truthfully, other than one issue that we were having to deal with has calmed down. And I would encourage us to kind of maintain that. I think that's a good thing. Let's figure out what we can do as it relates to this burden, how we're going to deal with it as a town. And you know, if it's getting help for Laura, which is what it sounds like, I think we need to deal with that.
Okay. Yep. I'd like to say that I'm on board with that. I'm happy that it's not a weaponized select board packet anymore, and I do think it's calmed things down. And I still see letters to the editor. I still get calls from residents. We still get emails, and they're CC'd to everyone. So I think the communication is still there. I'm open to coming up with other ways to facilitate more communication, but I'd like to change what we made. Chris?
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, if I could just wrap up a couple comments. So I think we shifted the burden from Caitlin to now Laura, which then obviously is impacted, and now we're looking at hiring a part-time person it just compounds what we did. I think that out of all the emails that we received on items that are pertaining to the agenda, I don't think there's any gray area on any of the emails since August, whether or not it would be pertaining to the agenda or not. It was cut and dry as far as I can tell from all of them. And if there's a single email someone can point out, I'm all ears for that. And then just wrapping it up, the school committee seems to be doing it and having their emails pertaining to the agenda in the packet. I don't see why we can't actually do that as well when it pertains to an agenda item. They have public record requests all the time, I'm sure. Laura has to deal with some of that and then forward them on over there. Somehow they're doing it, and I think that we should be doing it as well.
Okay, I hear you. I will add that I've had conversations with probably Laura and Matt, and then the police chief joined in about, you know, in general, since the law changed in 2017, the demand for service in the area of public records requests, commercial and private, has increased. So I'm not surprised that the budget doesn't include requests for more staffing in that area. Okay.
It's just a shame that
Aaron,
they,
Bob has his hand raised.
Okay, can't
over
see.
here.
Sure, Bob.
Thanks. Chris, one of the tricky parts related to agenda items is timing. Your packet goes out typically on a Wednesday, sometimes on a Thursday. And quite often that's what generates emails about your next meeting. But those emails don't go in that packet. They go in a future packet, the old way. So that's the challenge. What do you mean by related to the agenda? Related to a past agenda, a future agenda, or a current agenda? And if the answer is kind of maybe all of the above, you know, all of your public records requests, emails relate to a past agenda or a future agenda, because that stuff's on your agenda all the time. So I don't think it is as black and white. I wish it were. And timing is one of the reasons.
And even to the extent a given email or a set of emails it's very obvious, it still wouldn't require staff time or council time to go through each email and decide in or out. And that's just, I don't think that's time well spent. And then it sort of opens up the question as to whether they made the right judgment call or not.
Yeah, and on public records, at least there's a little bit more clarity about that judgment and the rules. Not meaning to put a burden on Laura, but she's got more clear guidelines of what is a public records request and what's a responsive request, response. You know, there certainly does involve judgment, but any approach you're going to take doesn't involve staff and judgment. And the question is, you know, what's the best solution? What's the best balance there? And, you know, don't forget that, you know, at some point, town council needs to be available to answer any question, because there are things that go to the board that should be privileged, no matter who they came from. That's town councils should decide that. So if someone sent you an email about litigation, you know, that's not public record. And that's something that, again, there's more defined rules. Your policy, for instance, I know there's wording you have about trying to protect the identity of minors, and that's great. Public records law does not have that generally. There's a small part where that's exempted. But again, public records law is much more black and white defined than your policy ever will be. Your policy is always going to involve board judgment, staff judgment, much more so. You know, and it seems like the real objective is, you know, is communication going well with the majority of the community? You know, I would say yes. You're not getting a lot of complaints. And then how to minimize the remainder, how to minimize and satisfy. And you have something scheduled in January to try to do that. You know, see what happens.
That's something to look forward to.
Well, it's interesting because it feels like the complaints have gone down since we changed our policy. And I think that may be because we weren't really the audience for a lot of those complaints. The community was really the audience for some of the complaints that we received, which in theory were directed to the board, but really they think people were seeking a larger audience.
Absolutely, it's a balancing act.
I would just disagree with the complaints going down from a personal standpoint.
Uh-oh. Okay, all right, that we had the discussion and we'll
Thank
see
you.
what January brings. Thank you, Chris. Could I entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Hold on.
And get it in.
May I make 2 comments first?
Okay, oh, no, you made a motion, we can't, right?
She's stuck in
No,
her-
Laura, you're standing in the way of adjourning.
Did somebody say a second?
I'm sorry.
So it's
2
okay?
seconds.
Okay, it's okay then.
So I just want to point out that when it comes to the public records request, as Matt mentioned during his presentation for the budget, that the total number of public records requests has doubled. As of right now, we have over 480 requests that I've dealt with personally. That does not include the police department. Only 3 of those were of select board emails. So it's not just select board emails, it's not the entire issue. And I also just wanted to ask you as a board, anytime that I get a request for for select board emails and I go to issue that request, do you want to be informed
Yes,
so that you're aware that they went out?
yes, I'd like to. How do, Ann and Carlo, how do you feel?
It would be nice to have a heads up.
Yes.
You know, we know that it's all public record, but it would be nice to know.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know if it's heads up or heads down, but
No,
yes.
right, that's done, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for humoring me, and my apologies for
No, you help us
delaying your
out
adjournment.
all the time, thanks for staying late again.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, all those in favor, on Zoom, we have Ann Landry and Carlo Bacci. Ann, how do you vote?
Yeah.
And Carlo?
Yes.
And here we have, Chris Haley, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Mark?
Yes.
And Karen? Yes, we are adjourned.